Chapter 1537. However, there were also some powerful and idle deity emperors who were tempted. Those deity emperors were originally idlers. The arrival of the era of great battles was a huge opportunity. Even if they lost, they would still be able to become famous in the future. It was also a great fortune. For example, the Kuan Pung Divine Lady. Recently, several innate Kuan Pungs were born in the world. She was prepared to work with the masters of the Kuan Pung race to establish the Kuan Pung sacred land and gather some spiritual beasts with the bloodline of the Kuan Pung. Another example was the Ice Snow Deity Emperor. He was also preparing to gather some innate ice snow fairies born in the extreme north snow region to establish the Ice Snow Sacred Clan. This could be said to be the first era of the Spirit Sea Void Great Cosmos. As the experts of the Golden Era, many experts had witnessed how powerful and prosperous the first era of the Spirit Sea was. There were many famous immemorial great emperors and Taoists. Now they had the same opportunity. Even if the last inheritance was destroyed, it would not be a waste to witness the first era of the Spirit Sea's advancement. Even if it was not enough, they could also become the ancestors of forces like the 72 mysterious sects. After receiving the permission of the Master God of the Divine System, some of the powerful deity emperors left the Lingshao Heavenly Palace and went to a nearby palace to report. Then, they went straight to the Spirit Sea to establish their own inheritance forces. On the high throne, Qin Feng watched coldly as some of the deities left. Freedom in the Frost World. He never stopped the deities from making their choice. These days, his Spirit Sea Heavenly Tao Wheel was getting stronger day by day. It was gradually merging with the inescapable net. No matter what kind of overlord appeared in the Spirit Sea, he was like Tao ancestor Hong Jun, who sat high in the 9 heavens and controlled the changes of the heavenly Tao. A second innate Tao aura emerged from his body. Above his head, on top of the 3 Tao lotuses, the first gray lotus swayed. It seemed to have merged with the innate Tao of creation. On the lotus, there was an 18-grade lotus seat that rotated slowly. There was a ray of light in the lotus. It carried a faint 3-colored aura. The aura of chaos was blurry, and there was a terrifying power that seemed to be able to affect the heavens and realms. The innate 3-colored chaotic light. The 3 colors were the phenomena of a heavenly king avatar. It was rumored that there were only a few innate saint gods in the Spirit Sea who could cultivate such a Dharma body. One of them was the primordial chaos Taoist, the other was the ancient Sui sovereign, and the last was the Eastern Baron Emperor. However, Qin Feng's battle body was still being nurtured, absorbing a part of the Spirit Sea's origin. As the creator space behind him merged with the Spirit Sea, the battle body was being refined bit by bit, and its power increased. Among the 3 flowers, besides the first one, the second one was gradually becoming clearer. On top of the lotus, there was a gray precious book. It was misty and emitted an ethereal aura. The Universe Book was only a step away from becoming a connate spiritual treasure. The time for its advancement was coming. Benefiting from the universe. Scriptures, innate universe. Qin Feng's cultivation of the innate universe, Tao, had improved tremendously. Qin Feng could sense that as long as the Universe Book was upgraded to a connate spiritual treasure, he would possess the right to become a second-step lord. Rumble. Bang bang bang. Qin Feng seemed to hear the sound of countless worlds shaking. The gods were completely unaware of this sound. Underworld, Earth Sovereign Mountain. This was the place where the dark laws of the underworld gathered. Earth Sovereign raised his head and looked outside the Spirit Sea. In his eyes, countless worlds outside the Spirit Sea were boiling like volcanoes that could erupt at any time. It was evil energy, a terrifying evil energy that frightened him to the core. If this evil energy continued to spread, it would contaminate the world. Earth Sovereign's expression changed slightly. For the first time, he discovered that there was such a terrifying thing in the Spirit Sea. However, above the numerous worlds, There was an invisible force that firmly suppressed the violent power that was about to erupt. It seemed to be the nemesis of the evil energy. Not only did it devour and refine it, it even fed it back. The refined energy was turned into an extremely pure evil origin and fed back into the 18 layers of hell in the depths of the underworld. After receiving the pure evil energy, the 18 layers of hell became abnormally powerful. The gods in the 18 layers of hell benefited greatly, especially the ancestral god of hell in the center. What the hell is that? Earth Sovereign's eyes flickered. He vaguely knew that the evil energy seemed to be coming from outside the spirit sea. Just by slightly sensing that evil aura, he could not help but feel frightened to the core. Qin Feng's figure had disappeared from the Lingshao heavenly palace and appeared outside the spirit sea, looking at the violently boiling evil energy. Qin Feng sneered and thought to himself, "I finally sense something wrong, but it's too late. It's the heavenly way." In the depths of the heavenly way seal, evil Lord Lawlessness's face was extremely gloomy with his hands under his sleeves. At this moment, after nearly 1,000 years of erosion, he finally managed to invade most of his avatar. However, as soon as he entered, he immediately felt that something was wrong. His evil origin had been lost by 80 to 90%. Moreover, there were countless restrictions around, and those restrictions vaguely revealed the aura of a heavenly way monster. However, compared to ordinary heavenly way monsters, that terrifying heavenly way monster was much more powerful. It seemed to have completely mastered the rules of heaven and earth in this world, and was much more powerful than him, a second-step lord. Most of his evil origin had been transformed by the heavenly way monster, and became nourishment for the heavenly way. "Come out, I know you've already developed your own will." He was not aware of Qin Feng's existence, and only thought that this world had been occupied by the heavenly way. "You can't kill me. I still have a part of my origin outside. Even if you destroy this part of my origin, I'll definitely be able to revive in a short period of time with the power that I've mastered. It's better to squash enmity than keep it alive." Looking at the enormous heavenly way will above his head, evil Lord Lawlessness's voice carried a faint hint of evil charm and evil temptation that could vaguely trigger the heavenly way evil rules of heaven and earth. There was no sound. In the depths of the heavenly way, a voice appeared silently in Qin Feng's primordial spirit. "Let him go. Letting him go is the best plan. Otherwise, you'll completely offend a second-step lord. You've already offended many god systems. You can't afford to offend another second-step lord." This extremely evil energy seemed to ignore the heavenly way's obstruction and affected his mind. It can actually affect the mind of a pinnacle innate saint-god expert without a sound. Qin Feng was shocked. One must know that the unknown evil overgod's origin had already been transformed by him through the spirit sea. With a thought, a faint Buddhist chant appeared in the depths of Qin Feng's soul and instantly destroyed that portion of evil energy. Rumble! It was as if heaven and earth were falling apart. Evil Lord Lawlessness was already smiling sinisterly as he suddenly turned into billions of evil spiritual lights that blasted at the heavenly way seals around him. It was a mighty sight. Qin Feng's face turned cold. Once he destroyed those heavenly way seals, he would definitely be able to enter the spirit sea. If he was allowed to enter the spirit sea, he would be like a ferocious tiger entering a flock of sheep. Chapter 1538. Never doubt the destructive power of a chaotic evil god. The chaotic evil gods were born in a world of destruction. They were born with an incomparable chaotic power. Ling Hai had just leveled up not long ago. Although he had built the inescapable net, he was still unable to put up much resistance against a chaotic evil god who was bent on destruction. Qin Feng would not let the chaotic evil god escape. Qin Feng flashed and appeared in front of the vast and mighty evil spirit light. He unleashed a super divine technique. Heavenly Path Divine Seal. Countless worlds suddenly intertwined with this power and turned into a terrifying fire net. As if they had hit an iron plate, the billions of evil light flew back and countless spirit light rolled back. The power of the heavenly path. Evil Lord Lawlessness's face turned ugly. The vast heavenly path flames were like a huge furnace that entered the countless worlds and refined them inch by inch. Massacre light, all evil dragons. Accompanied by a loud shout, his body suddenly collapsed like an exploding star. Endless evil energy spread out and split into countless worlds, sweeping through countless worlds. Under the vast evil spirit light, all things in the world seemed to be wailing as if they had met an unstoppable apocalypse. They turned into an extremely evil aura. Mountains, rivers, space-time, the firmament, and even worlds were turned into evil energy. Roar. Vaguely, a terrifying evil dragon that could devour billions of lives appeared. Its horns were towering, and it was abnormally terrifying. Doomsday Evil Dragon. So the so-called Evil Lord Lawlessness is a Doomsday Evil Dragon. The Doomsday Evil Dragon was not enough to be called a dragon. It was a terrifying creature that was born on the premise of destroying a greater world. The Doomsday Evil Dragon was extremely rare. Even among the chaotic evil gods, it was probably rare. Vast evil spirit light spread out, and in the blink of an eye, a large part of the surrounding world was turned into nothingness. Innate massacre and innate nothingness. Two types of innate Taoist rhymes vaguely appeared. Qin Feng looked at this scene calmly. All techniques returned to the same place. His art of inner demons could also reach this stage if he cultivated it to the highest level. Not only could he infiltrate living beings, but he could also infiltrate mountains, rivers, the heavens, and the world of spacetime. With a thought, he could transform into countless living beings and billions of spacetimes. At the same time, he could refine all of those living beings and convert them into energy to replenish himself. Qin Feng's expression was calm as he looked at everything calmly, allowing the countless worlds to be devoured by the evil lord. The power of the heavenly Tao divine seal had long seeped into countless worlds and billions of living beings. If it were not for the fact that the evil lord was still at his peak, even if he had the source of the spirit sea as his backing, he would still be in for a headache. Qin Feng suddenly felt lucky. If it were not for the inescapable trap and the spirit sea's wheel of the heavenly way, he really would not have been able to do anything to a second-step Lord-level powerhouse like the evil Lord. Roar. Sword of Void. The gigantic Doomsday Evil Dragon did not attack immediately. Instead, it burned all of the power it had obtained from destroying the world and even burned its own indestructible evil soul. The destructive gray flames began to expand like a huge gray sun, rapidly expanding like a balloon. Its power was climbing steadily. An earth-shattering power was brewing, causing spacetime to tremble. This power was not huge, but its essence was extremely high. Once it exploded, the spirit sea would definitely be severely damaged. The evil lord's thoughts were extremely gloomy and decisive. He knew that most of his source had been devoured. Even if he destroyed many worlds and obtained a part of it to replenish himself, he was still no match for the unknown heavenly Tao monster. He might as well go all out and destroy the evil soul. Even if he could not severely injure the heavenly Tao monster, he could still severely damage the spirit sea. A futile struggle. Qin Feng shook his head. He raised a hand and pointed it straight. Bang, bang, bang. It was as if billions of lightning and fire had exploded from the Doomsday Evil Dragon's body. The power of the heavenly Tao instantly drowned the Doomsday Evil Dragon. Countless gray flames were completely refined from the inside like volcanoes at the mouth of a mountain pass. Chi. Silently, the gigantic gray sun turned into ashes bit by bit. The evil lord stared coldly at the heavenly Tao high in the sky. We will meet again. As the cold and hoarse voice fell, the gigantic gray sun suddenly collapsed, turning into a ray of light and flying away. Qin Feng looked coldly at this scene. Those countless worlds and billions of living beings had been refined by him. It was originally a huge trap. The evil lord had refined those countless worlds and billions of living beings, swallowing all the heavenly Tao's power into his stomach. However, the evil lord had no other choice. He had already plunged into this trap. He could only try to refine Qin Feng's heavenly Tao's power. If he could completely refine it, he would be able to break through this huge trap and enter the inner layer of the Spirit Sea. Just as most of Evil Lord Lawless Origin imprints were being refined in the Spirit Sea, in the chaos, an illusory pitch-black evil shadow on top of a chaos rock seemed to have fused with the chaos, becoming indistinguishable from one another. In an instant, a wave of pitch-black flames exploded around the chaos evil shadow. Failed! The chaotic evil shadow's face flashed with a trace of terrifying malevolence. At the side, the evil god of chaos looked at the evil lord in shock. Under that aura she was like an ant shivering. However, when she noticed the weakness of the evil lord, a trace of surprise flashed across her eyes. After a moment, the evil lord retracted the anger on his face. He looked coldly in the direction of the Spirit Sea. This time, although he had split a large portion of his source into countless parts, there was still a portion that had yet to enter the Spirit Sea. As a level 17 Chaos Evil God, his true spirit was entrusted to the Tao of Chaos. As long as he was not completely destroyed, he would eventually have a chance to recover. Spirit Sea, I will be back. The evil lord's eyes flashed coldly. As long as he had 10,000 years, he would be able to recover once again. He turned around and looked coldly at the evil god of chaos under his feet. Did she really think that he did not notice the flash of surprise in her eyes? His eyes flashed with ruthlessness. After completely refining evil Lord Lawlessness's origin imprint, Qin Feng's gaze shifted to the outside of the Spirit Sea. Qin Feng was clear that although the evil lord had fallen into his trap, the level 17 Chaos Evil God would not be killed so easily. The evil lord was not dead. However, after this battle, the evil lord would not be able to recover without 10,000 years. 10,000 years was enough to attempt to break through to the innate universe Tao. Rumble. As evil Lord Wu Fa's huge source imprint was completely refined, a huge primal chaos evil god source was left floating in the void. This ball of chaos evil god source contained more than 60% of the evil lord's source. Any evil god on the side of the evil Tao could become a new chaos evil god after refining it. Chapter 1539. Chaos Fiend Gods were the ultimate existences born from the fusion of the evil Tao's laws with Deshang. They were the lords of the evil Tao, the kings of darkness, and the natural rulers of the Chaos faction. However, almost all of the evil Tao's laws in the Spirit Sea had been converted after the birth of demon gods under the demonic Tao. Of the 9 heretical forefathers, there were only a handful of fiend gods under the evil Tao's laws apart from the ones who'd perished. Qin Feng's eyes flickered as he looked at the chaos evil god's origin that contained extreme darkness and evil. Balance was necessary in the world. As the saying went, where there was light there would be darkness. If one of the two extremes was lost, the world's growth would stagnate and begin to regress. According to what Qin Feng had seen of the future from the river of time in the Spirit Sea, the future of the world would fall into chaos. The 6 origin sacred lands had been born for this very reason. Qin Feng looked at the ball of evil, darkness, and chaos origin energy. It contained more than 60% of a chaos fiend god's strength. Any fiend god that absorbed it had a high chance of becoming a new chaos fiend god. Of course, that wasn't the greatest value of the origin energy. Any ancestor god that cultivated the chaos, darkness, or evil laws would have a 20% chance of confirming their Tao after devouring it. 20%, this was an extremely shocking probability. Emperor Earthly Sovereign Wang Daoi had schemed for 10 lifetimes and obtained the Fu Dao of the Abyss, but that only increased his chances of confirming his Dao by 10%. Qin Feng had risked his life traversing the various worlds before he'd confirmed his Dao, but he'd only managed to increase his chances by 10%. That was enough to show how precious the Fiend God's origin energy was. Moreover, its hidden value didn't stop there. In the scenes Qin Feng had seen in the River of Time, there would be 6 origin sacred lands in the future. One of them was the Darkness Origin Sacred Land. A holy god would be born from the Darkness Origin Sacred Land. The Darkness Origin Sacred God would be born from the Darkness Origin energy of the universe. If anyone could obtain this origin energy that contained darkness, chaos, and evil, they would gain the favor of the Darkness Origin Sacred Land and become the master of the Darkness Origin Sacred Land. In the world, not to mention the experts on the evil god side, there were actually quite a number of experts who cultivated the acquired great Daos of darkness, evil, and chaos. Within the Spirit Sea Divine System, there were many powerful beings who were on the side of the acquired great Tao. For example, the innate dragon of destruction, one of the 12 true disciples of Xingqian's school, was born and was now the divine emperor of destruction, or the firmament devil emperor. Although the Tsangtian demon emperor cultivated the inborn true inheritance of massacre, he could also absorb the chaotic evil god's origin that contained endless darkness, or perhaps Red Lotus. As the lord of the endless river of blood and the ancestral god of hell, although Red Lotus was an ancestral god of the post-celestial great Tao of blood, she was still able to absorb the chaos evil god's quintessence. There were quite a few candidates. After some thought, Qin Feng came up with a candidate. Countless rays of light shone as the trembling sound reverberated throughout the universe. It was as if a ray of light had illuminated the entire spirit sea. Countless people looked up and saw that there seemed to be billions of beams of light in the endless sky. It was like an endless sea of light. It gathered all the light in the world, including the light of the sun, the light of the stars, the light of candles, and the light of hope. It was as if all the light in the spirit sea had gathered. Above the endless world, Qin Feng was dressed in a black robe. His black hair fluttered as he looked up at the sky and muttered to himself. The light origin sacred land has been born. After the fall of the chaotic evil god, the light origin sacred land has been born in advance. Looks like there's trouble again. Qin Feng's eyes flashed with a hint of helplessness. Since the light origin sacred land had been born in advance, the light origin sacred god would be born within 1,000 years. Although the new origin sacred god might only be an acquired sacred god, it would be troublesome if they were disloyal. What's going on? What's that place? What's with the rich light origin force? It seems to have been born from the sun star. It's like a greater thousand realm made of pure light. It's not a greater thousand realm. It seems to be a greater thousand realm nurtured by the light origin force. Sensing the extremely rich light origin force, the billions of gods in the spirit sea grew excited. This was especially true for the many gods of the connate light origin force. In the vast and boundless sea of the East Sea, a passageway suddenly appeared on the originally turbulent sea surface. The seawater naturally parted, and a figure walked out from it. It was an elegant middle-aged man with snow-white hair and a clean white robe draped over him. He raised his head. The light origin sacred land, an origin sacred land nurtured by the spirit sea's origin. Haha, looks like there's hope for me to attain Tao this time. Ever since the primeval overgod had attained Tao, many primordial experts had been hiding in the dark to avoid the spotlight. At the same time, they focused on cultivating in secret to attain Tao. The appearance of the light origin sacred land gave countless peerless experts hidden in the various major planes a glimmer of hope. Practically all the experts who were able to cultivate to the universe enlightened ancestral God realm had extremely high expectations towards the 16th level of the Tao integration realm. Without that sort of desire, without the will to painstakingly seek the grand Tao, it was extremely difficult for them to cultivate to the universe enlightened ancestral God realm. Previously, when the Spirit Sea had advanced, many ancient hermit experts had failed to seize the opportunity and allowed Qin Feng to reach Tao integration first. Although Qin Feng had some reputation before attaining Tao, he was but a nobody compared to the many old antiques of the primordial era. They had allowed a nobody to attain Tao before them. However, this also filled many ancient experts with anticipation. It had only been a short while, but many of the old antiques who were proficient in heavenly divination had already seen through the changes in heavenly mysteries. Ha! It's the light origin sacred land, a great creation nurtured by the light origin of heaven and earth. No one can stop the one who obtains the sacred land from becoming a holy god. Not even the primeval over-god can defy the heavens. Many of the old antiques guffawed as they divined. Many of the ancient living beings were worried that the primeval over-god would interfere with the light origin sacred land. Now they could finally relax. Almost all of the light god emperors and ancestor gods were tempted. The descent of the light origin sacred land gave everyone an equal opportunity, regardless of their faction. All light ancestor gods had a chance. In the eyes of many factions and even the ancestor gods, this might be an opportunity. They could break free from the oppression of the Spirit Sea divine system. An excellent opportunity to stand up to the Spirit Sea divine system. As long as they seized the opportunity and became a light origin holy god, they might be able to share the Spirit Sea divine system with the Spirit Sea. Chapter 1540. It wasn't just the ancient hidden experts. Several light-based god emperors and ancestor gods in the Spirit Sea divine system couldn't contain their joy either. Breaking through to the 16th level and mastering the laws of light was the ultimate goal of all light-based experts. There were no light attribute powerhouses who could resist such a temptation. In the divine system, the Grand Primordium Heavenly Lord, the great Sun Demon Emperor of the Golden Crow race, and the Divine Light Emperor Xiao Yuchan had already made their move the moment they sensed the great changes in the world. Spirit Sea Divine System, Earth Swamp Divine Region. Qin Feng's figure quietly appeared on top of a mountain shrouded in light. Inside the palace there were many divine palaces. Countless peaceful living beings gathered in front of the little light ancient trees, meditating and reciting scriptures to refine the innate light power. Above the spring water in the mountain, bright white lotuses bloomed. It was so beautiful that it made one forget about their worries. When Qin Feng appeared, he saw a beautiful woman in white who was meditating beside one of the divine palaces in the spring water sect. She was tall and had snow-white hair. She had a pure and cold aura. She seemed to have sensed Qin Feng's arrival and looked up. "Sir Han greets your majesty." The goddess of light stood up. She wore a white dress and her face was cold and elegant. Her facial features were exquisite and clear. She could be called a stunner. No need for formalities. Slightly sizing up this beauty, Qin Feng stretched out his hand and made a grabbing motion in the air. A formless power like a cool breeze lifted up the beautiful goddess's kneeling posture. There was a flash of black light and a figure hurried over. "Your Majesty, are you planning to make my sister the master of the light origin sacred ground?" The voice had already arrived before the figure arrived. A stunningly beautiful woman in a black dress appeared beside the spring water. It was Shi Tong, the dark shadow consort. "Shi Tong, don't be rude." Shi Han turned her head and frowned. She scolded softly. Shi Tong glanced at Shi Han disapprovingly. "Sister, you've been in love with His Majesty for 1,000 years. Don't you understand His Majesty's personality? His Majesty isn't that petty." After she finished speaking, her almond-shaped eyes flashed. Your Majesty, I've heard that the Light Origin Sacred Land was nurtured by the Light Origin Sacred Land. Anyone who refines the Light Origin Sacred Land will be able to successfully attain Tao. Is this true? Qin Feng glanced at Shi Tong. Shi Han and Shi Tong were both forcibly taken away by him, but after spending over 1,000 years together, their hearts had already been moved by him. Although they didn't follow each other through life and death, they gradually forgot about their former lover. You could say that. Qin Feng nodded slightly. If that's the case, elder sister also has a chance? 100 years ago, you awakened your third forbidden eye and became a divine light emperor. You should be qualified to enter the Light Origin Sacred Land, right? Shi Tong stared intently at Qin Feng. Little sister, the Light Origin Sacred Land is a matter of great importance. Even His Majesty can't interfere in this matter. Don't make things difficult for His Majesty. Shi Han's temperament was even calmer. She looked at Qin Feng with her beautiful eyes. I'm sure His Majesty is here today for this matter as well. Qin Feng smiled when he met Shi Han's gaze. His divine concubine of light was truly exceptionally intelligent. My beloved concubine is truly intelligent. However, you should cultivate without worry. Qin Feng didn't make any promises right away. Among his concubines, most of them were people of great courage and wisdom. Although Shi Han kept a low profile, her intelligence wasn't inferior to the Queen of Silvermoon or Yu Yao's at all. However, unlike the Queen of Silvermoon and Yu Yao, almost all of her intelligence was focused on cultivation. Thank you, Your Majesty. Shi Han curtsied slightly. She understood Qin Feng's intentions, but Shi Han had no intention of going to the Light Origin Sacred Land to compete for it. Of course, she also yearned for the Light Origin Sacred Land. However, Shi Han was even more aware of the kind of existences that would compete for the Light Origin Sacred Land. Ancestor gods were at least god emperors. The strength of those old antiques wasn't something an expert who'd just become a god emperor could compare to. This was a battle of the great Tao. They wouldn't go easy on her just because she was the primeval overgod's concubine. Qin Feng smiled when he saw this. Cultivate well. I know what you're thinking. One day, I'll definitely grant you your wish. Forget it. Silently, with a flash of light, Qin Feng's figure disappeared from the minor light mountain. Sister, what did His Majesty mean at the end? Can he really help you obtain the Light Origin Sacred Land? Shi Tong's beautiful eyes looked in the direction Qin Feng had left. She turned around and looked enviously at Shi Han. Shi Han shook her head slightly and said softly, "The pressure on His Majesty isn't light at all." As a light-type god emperor, Shi Han had also resonated with part of the Light Origin Sacred Land and obtained a portion of its secrets. The descent of the Light Origin Sacred Land was a great opportunity for many light-type god emperors and ancestor gods. But for the Spirit Sea Divine Branch, it was a considerable danger. The Origin Sacred God wasn't an ordinary 16th rank sacred god. The Origin Sacred God was born from the world's quintessence. Once it broke through, not only would it wield a portion of the quintessence, but it would also wield a portion of the world's quintessence. By borrowing the world's quintessence, the Origin Sacred God was far stronger than ordinary sacred gods. Sister, I don't understand. Why didn't His Majesty seal the Light Origin Sacred Land? Although he can't stop the Light Origin Sacred God from being born, he has the power to delay its birth by 1,000 years, or even 10,000 years. Shi Tong still didn't understand. You don't understand. Shi Han looked in the direction of Lingshao Palace. It's not that he doesn't dare, it's that he can't. Why? Shi Tong frowned. Is His Majesty unable to suppress a few light-type god emperors and ancestor gods with his strength? Shi Han's expression was impassive. This is the momentum of the world. Even if His Majesty possesses 1,000 abilities and methods, he can't go against it. Then are we just going to sit back and watch the other factions take the Light Origin Sacred Mountain? Sure Tong was unwilling to accept this outcome. Sure Han smiled faintly. She walked gracefully to a pavilion on top of the mountain and gazed into the vast sea of clouds in the distance. After comforting the divine concubine of light, Sure Han, Qin Feng directly tore through space. In the next moment, he appeared outside a dense and pure sea of light. The Light Origin Sacred Land was slowly descending. An invisible force was protecting it, preventing anyone from approaching as it descended. Outside the sacred land, countless radiances could be seen from hundreds of millions of miles away. There were also countless minor and major worlds illuminated by the radiance, turning them into a paradise formed of pure light. Just the minor and major worlds radiated by the radiance were enough to tempt the gods of light. And at the center, the entire Light Origin Sacred Land was like a giant sun. In just a single breath, Qin Feng felt an extremely pure Light Origin energy being absorbed into his body. His divine power actually increased slightly. Chapter 1541. The Power of the Origin. Qin Feng closed his eyes as his heart trembled. The power of the Origin was one of the most miraculous powers. Any living being that obtained a trace of the power of the Origin would be able to become a god in the shortest amount of time. The innate Yuan Qi was a power that was born after the dilution of the Origin. With just a trace of the Origin, a god could easily become an innate deity king. With more Origin, the Light Divine Emperor Xiao Yuchan would be able to cultivate the body of an innate deity emperor by absorbing more of the innate Light Origin Qi. However, the Light Origin Sacred Land before them contained an unimaginably rich amount of Light Origin Qi. And this was only the outer perimeter. At this moment, there were more than 60 deity emperors and above gathered in the outer perimeter of the Light Origin Sacred Land. There were deity emperors and deity emperors from the Ling High God system, some old antiques from the primordial and ancient era, some powerful deity emperors and deity emperors from the 3,000 spirit domains, and some of the original factions, the 72 mysterious sects, the 800 unorthodox groups, and the primordial 10 paths. Among them, there were also many new overlords. Not only were there many light elemental experts, but there were also many other powerful beings that came to watch the show. The deity emperors and deity emperors each took their own side. Some of the stronger ones took over some minor and major worlds that were affected by the Light Origin Sacred Land's radiation. There were even a few battles because of this. Many deity emperors and deity emperors could see clearly that the Light Origin Sacred Land was not theirs to take. The minor and major worlds around the Light Origin Sacred Land were baptized by the Light Origin Qi and had been reborn. Most of them contained a significant amount of the Light Origin Qi. Any light elemental high-level god that refined it would benefit greatly. There were also some major worlds that were affected by the Light Origin Qi. They were expanding rapidly and were showing signs of transforming into great world. This made the eyes of the many factions brighten. I didn't expect there to be so many godly emperors and godly emperors here. There are more than 30 godly emperors gathered here. If we include the ancient existences hidden in the dark and the various overlords, they're almost on par with our Spirit Sea divine system. The ancestor god of the endless seawater prefecture's holy land, the mother of all seas, Inji, exclaimed in a low voice. She looked at the 4 existences beside her, whose auras were surging. The southern sea's merciless palace's elder god Merciless, the eastern sea's primeval dragon Aoqing, the northern sea's black tortoise ancestral god, and the western sea's ice soul ancestral god. These 4 were the overlords of the 4 seas. Of course, even though it was an overlord-class power, the center of the 5 seas was still under the control of the Dragon Palace of the 5 seas. The Dragon Palace of the 5 seas was the representative of the Spirit Sea God system in the 5 seas, and it was in charge of the many underwater mansions in the 5 seas. The 5 overlords mostly controlled the many continents and islands in the outer seas. The number of innate gods that have been born in the past few years is simply too great. Innate gods are born almost every second. Although most of them are extremely weak innate gods, there are still some extremely monstrous existences among them. As time goes by, Ao Qing shook her head slightly. A hint of relief flashed through his eyes. Fortunately, the number of innate true dragons accounted for most of the innate gods, which allowed the dragon clan to maintain its prestige as a superclan. Inji, ancestral god Black Tortoise, and ancestral god Ice Soul smiled at her words. Jellyfish Inji belonged to the water spirit race. The 5 seas were huge, and there were countless huge river systems in the Spirit Sea. Thanks to this, the innate water spirit race was born. Now, as the mother of all water, Jellyfish Inji was worshipped by the innate water spirit race. The innate water fairy clan occupied the periphery of the vast endless sea, and their influence was growing by the day. Ancestral god Black Tortoise and ancestral god Ice Soul were the same. Ancestral god Black Tortoise was an innate true spirit, the ancestor of the Black Tortoise clan. Speaking of which, this Black Tortoise true spirit had met the primeval overgod once. He was suppressed in the ruins of the Spirit Void sect in the snowy tundra. Over the years, the Black Tortoise clan was not a minority among the innate gods that were born. Moreover, the innate Black Tortoise clan was generally very talented. Although there were less than 100,000 of them, they already occupied the vast North Sea. The overlord of the West Sea, ancestral god Ice Soul, built the Beiming Palace. His background was somewhat similar to the mother of all seas, Inji. However, ancestral god Ice Soul were rumored to be an ice elemental innate god from the primordial times. However, looking at the side, the 5 ancestral gods smiled wryly. Not only the 5 ancestral gods, but many powerful beings also had a change in expression. Tens of millions of gods were lined up, and the dense divine light was almost like an ocean. The terrifying formation made people feel fear from the depths of their souls. The fire division of the Spirit Sea divine system. In the distance, the grand ancestral god of the grand sacred ground, the innate phoenix ancestor of the Phoenix clan, the Qilin god of the Qilin clan, the barbarian race's barbaric ancestor Qi Yuan, the 5 elements shaman ancestor of the sorcerer race, and the radiant sacred lord all showed fear on their faces. The Spirit Sea divine system was just too powerful. Many of the overlords had dark expressions on their faces. The Spirit Sea divine system occupied the core of the 9 great divine lands, and each of the 9 divisions occupied a huge divine land. The 9 great divine lands were blessed by the heavens and were far superior to the average spirit realm. Even the northern continent, which ruled over hundreds of spirit realms, was far inferior to the 9 great divine lands. Taichu Heavenly Monarch. Many of the experts were looking at the leader of the tens of millions of gods. He wore a red robe and looked like an ancient sovereign born from fire. He had 6 powerful god emperors as his wings and a dozen fire elemental god emperors behind him. Seeing this ancient god, the great sun demon emperor, ancestor Phoenix, and light sacred master's expressions changed slightly, and they all had a fierce look on their faces. It was said that this fire division's great heavenly monarch also cultivated the great Tao of light. Fire division's great heavenly monarch. Qin Feng looked indifferently at the powerful fire elemental ancestral god in a place where many ancient existences couldn't reach. Fire division's great heavenly monarch was a Taoist from the primordial era, the Taichu Taoist. His true form was an innate Yuan spirit born in the primordial era, when the Spirit Sea was created and heaven and earth were born. During the primordial era, he fell at the hands of the Golden Crow Demon Emperor and was only revived 1,000 years ago. Several hundred years ago, he submitted to Qin Feng, and Qin Feng gave him the position of Fire Division's great heavenly monarch. Without Qin Feng's orders, He naturally didn't dare to bring the fire division's gods here. Since these people wanted to challenge him and challenge his authority as the overlord of the Spirit Sea, he had to find some entertainment for them. Taichu, heavenly monarch, looked around at the many worlds that were occupied by the ancestral gods. He waved his hand. The few of you, take over all the minor and major worlds around here. But as soon as he finished speaking, the ancestral gods' expressions turned ugly. Chapter 1542. When the Taichu heaven monarch came to this plane, he had already noticed the small world that had been baptized by the Holy Land of Light. Looking at the many ancestral gods, he sneered. What could a bunch of stragglers do when millions of gods and demons joined forces? Many major factions were forcefully chased away. Only a portion of the worlds that were under the control of the Spirit Sea god system remained. For example, the Demon Gate, the Dragon Tribe, the Black Tortoise Tribe, and the Endless Sea God Palace. The goddesses of Merciless Palace thought that they would be chased away by the Fire Tribe gods. However, for some reason, the Fire Tribe gods took a detour and targeted the Five Elements Sorcerer Tribe. Merciless, do you have some sort of relationship with the Taichu Heaven Monarch? They didn't chase you away? Jellyfish Inji appeared in a large world that Merciless Palace occupied. This large world had been baptized by the Holy Land of Light. It was brimming with vitality and was filled with dense holy chi. This was an extremely good continent with great potential. The Merciless Palace was full of women. They were surrounded by divine light and looked like a boundless immortal palace. As Jellyfish Inji's body descended, heavy rain appeared. Dense water element spiritual energy boiled, and the roar of endless waves could be vaguely heard. Amidst the phenomenon, Jellyfish Inji's divine body descended. It was as if the great Tao of water had descended from the heavens. Merciless ancestral god's eyes were cold as she stared at the enchanting Jellyfish Inji. She frowned and didn't understand. However, this action made many factions associate Merciless Palace. For a moment, many factions looked at Merciless Palace with strange expressions. Flattery? Lackey? Vigilance and alienation. Jellyfish Inji landed on Merciless Ancestral God. Merciless Ancestral God seemed to be confused. I didn't expect it to be her. In a plane, he seemed to have merged with the entire plane. Qin Feng looked at Merciless Ancestral God with a strange look in his eyes. He was the one who ordered the Taichu Heaven Monarch. However, Qin Feng didn't expect to meet this woman here. Back then, he had transformed into Yu Hua and entered the Sea Demon Palace. He hoped to enter the Sea Spirit World and obtain the Sea Soul Sarira and the Sea God's legacy. Back then, this woman was the 9th princess of the Sea Demon Palace. She was in love with the 3rd prince of the Endless Dragon Palace. However, this fact angered the Siren Queen, and the Siren Queen gave it to the talented Yu Hua as a gift. As a result, the Siren Queen accidentally met Qin Feng. After one night, this woman entered the Sea Spirit World and disappeared without a trace. Originally, Qin Feng thought that he had fallen in the Sea Spirit World. Qin Feng recalled the scene from back then and chuckled in his heart. He had to admit that the Siren clan was indeed a rare beauty in the world. The women of the Siren clan were all gifts in bed, especially the royalty. At that time, he did not know that this woman was the princess of the Sea Demon clan, the daughter of the Siren Queen. But come to think of it, the Siren Queen was still in his backyard and had become the queen of the water elemental realm in the Lord God's space. For 1,000 years, there was no lack of love and affection. Qin Feng glanced at Ancestor God emotionless. He could see Ancestor God emotionless cultivation level with a single glance. Ancestral God realm. Although he had only just entered the Ancestral God realm, this level of cultivation was considered extremely outstanding among the many ancient experts. The Overlord of the South Sea? Some information about the emotionless path in the South Sea flashed in his memory, and Qin Feng's expression changed slightly. Glancing at Ancestor God emotionless, Qin Feng's expression changed at this moment. Rumble. As if endless purple clouds descended from the sky, an incomparably majestic aura descended. Is that the sacred god, the earthly sovereign? Why is he here? This is the majesty of the sacred god, it's really terrifying. Everyone's expression changed. The gods at the side felt an almost irresistible and terrifying power exerted within a radius of hundreds of millions of miles. While many experts were in awe, an unconcealable desire and passion appeared in their eyes. The sacred god was an ultimate realm that most gods yearned for even in their dreams. Greetings, Your Majesty. The gods of the Fire Division hurriedly stepped forward and bowed. Greetings, Your Majesty. At the side, the Taichu Heaven Lord stepped forward and bowed. Although the earthly emperor was on the same level as him and was the leader of the mountain gods, he was still the sacred god, a world-class expert of the greater thousand worlds. Strength was the reason why people respected him. You're too polite, Taichu Heaven Lord. The earthly sovereign waved his hand. His eyes were fixed on the void in the distance. There was a terrifying aura there. It was just a little aura, but it made him feel an extremely terrifying pressure. Your Majesty! A faint voice with a trace of respect sounded. Senior Brother Wang, there's no need to be so polite. I don't want them to know of my existence. Qin Feng stopped the earthly emperor from bowing. The appearance of a world-class expert of the greater thousand worlds had undoubtedly created a huge pressure on many living beings. However, the earthly emperor, Wang Daoi, ignored these experts. In the eyes of the earthly emperor, these people were all ants. They were simply courting death if they wanted to fight with his junior brother. Even if some of these people became origin sacred gods, they would not be able to withstand a single slap from that person. However, these people probably did not know how terrifying that person was. The earthly emperor, Wang Daoi, glanced at the void and felt another aura that was far beyond the ancestor god realm. There was a strange look in his eyes. Now, the only one who could pose a threat to the primeval master god was probably that person. The earthly emperor's gaze soon sank into the light origin sacred land. In the void, the Genesis primordial spirit noticed the earthly emperor's gaze, but he did not care. His gaze also fell on the light origin sacred land, trying to peek into its mysteries. At this moment, the divine power fluctuation on his body was close to his peak. At most, he would need about 500 years to completely emerge and break through to the great Tao. However, he hoped more to comprehend the mysteries of the light origin sacred land and shorten this time. The Genesis primordial spirit had also noticed that the primeval master god's first innate great Tao had been perfected long ago. He had been stealing the origin of the spirit sea and using it to quickly deduce the second innate great Tao. He had already begun cultivating the second innate great Tao hundreds of years ago. With the support of most of the origin of the spirit sea, his comprehension of the second innate great Tao was extremely fast. The second innate great Tao was probably right in front of him. Once he broke through, it would be the end of the Genesis primordial spirit. Now, both of them were fighting for time. They had to seize every minute and second to improve. No matter who broke through first, it would be a huge problem for the other party. It could even be a disaster. Chapter 1543. Qin Feng looked at the light origin sacred land. In the eyes of many beings, the light origin sacred land seemed to have appeared out of thin air, as if it was born from billions of stars. However, that was not the case in the eyes of Qin Feng, Wang Daoi, and the Genesis primordial spirits. The light origin sacred land should have been born from the extreme sun star. The extreme sun star was the source of light in the world. The immemorial extreme sun star was incomparably huge. As a giant star among the billions of stars in the spirit sea that regulated the yin and yang of the world, it possessed a vast and mysterious power. It was yin and yang with the extreme moon star. The two immemorial extreme stars had been the kings of billions of galaxies since the immemorial era. It was only after the primeval Star Lord attained his Tao that the billions of stars' destiny shifted, and the importance of the two stars decreased slightly. However, the extreme Sun Star's power was indisputable. With the extreme Sun Star as the center, the massive light origin sacred land formed a huge origin greater thousand world. The origin greater thousand world was second only to the Spirit Sea and was far superior to ordinary greater thousand world. Took shape very quickly. In just a few years it was completely born. Vast and mighty light energy manifested. In the world, billions of purple clouds rose into the air as white lotuses bloomed. The postnatal great Tao on the side of light vibrated violently, as if celebrating the birth of the light origin sacred land. In the vast and mighty vision, countless living beings who cultivated the way of light only felt a trace of inexplicable enlightenment. Their supernatural powers increased greatly, or they absorbed a trace of the original power of light from the void, and were reborn. It's completely born. Our chance is here. At this moment, many light-type experts on the periphery sensed that the barrier that had been isolating them from the light origin sacred land had completely disappeared. At this moment, a vast and mighty brilliance flew out. Many living beings witnessed an unbelievable scene. It was a huge sacred mountain that seemed to cover the sky and the sun. Created from pure light, it stretched into the depths of the endless void. Vaguely, there were dragons and phoenixes at the top of the mountain, sacred and holy. Solemn, grand, solemn, and sacred. Vaguely, the rich light origin force condensed into countless light fairies, and there seemed to be a clear light holy song that resounded in the void. There were many treasure trees and jade palaces. Mountain paradise? Qin Feng couldn't help but be taken aback when he saw this boundless divine mountain. This divine mountain was extremely similar to mountain paradise in his creator space and the elemental realm of light. Could there be a connection between them? Qin Feng's eyes flickered. At the same time, he felt an immeasurable amount of light origin energy fluctuating rapidly. The barrier between the Holy Land and the gods had completely disappeared. The eyes of many gods of light lit up. Charge! Whoever goes in first and takes over the light origin sacred land will be the first to complete the Tao integration stage. Charge! It was accompanied by the shouts of many powerful beings. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Air-piercing sounds rang out incessantly, and streams of light rushed into the huge divine radiance mountain. Some non-light elemental creatures tried to sneak in, but a beam of divine light flew out and turned the deity emperor into ashes. There was a terrifying divine power in mountain paradise, and any non-light elemental experts who entered would be severely repelled. Some creatures didn't give up and tried to charge in with a mirror-like supreme treasure, but they were instantly turned into ashes by the milky white divine light. It was completely purified. Many powerful beings were intimidated for a time. It's useless. Retreat. Don't waste your time. The light origin sacred land will only nurture light elemental experts to enter and train. The earthly sovereign warned the many gods one last time. Don't try to attack the light origin sacred land with brute force. This place is nurtured by the origin, and it contains a light origin spiritual treasure. Once this light origin spiritual treasure is disturbed, no one will be able to escape. Light origin spiritual treasure. The gods were surprised and delighted. They couldn't believe it. Many powerful beings' greed was completely aroused. If we work together, there's no need to fear that we can't break through it. A God Emperor level expert shouted loudly and attracted over 10 other God Emperors to agree with him. Mighty divine light streaked across the plain and rushed toward the divine radiance mountain. Rumble! Like 10,000 bolts of lightning, a large patch of white lightning shot out and bombarded the dozen God Emperors. Under the horrifying gazes of the gods, they were instantly reduced to dust. Only then did the gods completely give up on the idea. However, not all of the light elemental gods rushed into the sacred hall mountain immediately. There were many light elemental god kings and god emperors who knew that their strength was limited. They couldn't compete with the god emperors and ancestor gods, so they simply sat down and cultivated outside the light origin sacred land, absorbing the light origin sacred land's power. A portion of the gods followed suit and sat cross-legged outside the light origin sacred land, absorbing the light origin spiritual treasure to cultivate their divine powers. Gods, listen up. Use your best skills and absorb as much light origin spiritual treasure as possible. You'd be an idiot if you don't take advantage of the situation. Once the light origin sacred god is born, there won't be such a good thing. On the other side, the Taichu heavenly monarch echoed in a profound manner. He called out to the fire elemental gods, god kings, god emperors, and god emperors to absorb the rich light origin spiritual treasure. Most of the fire elemental gods who could enter the spirit sea divine system's fire elemental gods were fire elemental gods and light elemental gods. Absorbing the light origin spiritual treasure was like adding wings to a tiger. Rumble. Following the Taichu heavenly monarch's call, the fire elemental gods immediately started absorbing the light origin spiritual treasure. Like a whirlwind, they devoured the light origin sacred land's overflowing light origin sacred land like a pack of wolves and tigers. Moments later, a group of powerful gods came to their senses. Taichu heavenly monarch. A powerful god emperor roared with an ashen face. What are you doing? Are you trying to fight us fire elemental gods one-on-one? The Taichu heavenly monarch opened his divine eyes and sneered. With the fire elemental gods and the master god behind him, he wasn't afraid of any ancestor god's provocation. Hearing this, the fire elemental gods opened their divine eyes with unfriendly expressions. The combined aura of the fire elemental gods swept across a large area of the void and crushed spacetime. It was extremely terrifying. Forget it, don't fight with that barbarian. A powerful ancestor god advised. A wise man knew better than to fight when the odds were against him. The ancestor gods swallowed their anger. The spirit sea was too powerful. The earthly sovereign glanced at the fire elemental gods, then cupped his fists at Qin Feng before turning to leave. He had already seen through a portion of the light origin sacred land's secret. In fact, Qin Feng had already seen the truth of the light origin sacred land. It was a treasure, a numinous treasure, an acquired numinous treasure nurtured by the solar star. That acquired numinous treasure could be said to be the core of the entire mountain paradise. Any living being who obtained the recognition of this acquired numinous treasure would become the master of mountain paradise. Chapter 1544. It was a pure yang spiritual treasure nurtured by the sun star. It was also the leakage of a trace of power from this spiritual treasure that prompted the sun star to automatically nurture the greater thousand world. Although he had found out the cause and effect, Qin Feng was a little curious about what kind of spiritual treasure it was to have such a miraculous power. With a point of his finger, two invisible lights penetrated the periphery of the sacred land nurtured by the sun star and probed towards the core of the sun star. Bang, bang, bang. As if it had sensed this probing, a huge invisible will blasted out from the depths of the sun star, forming countless reddish-gold light spots that bombarded. Bang, bang, bang. The two formless dots of light crumbled and shot towards Qin Feng, as though they wanted to shatter this existence that was trying to investigate. The sun star has nurtured an independent will similar to the heavenly Tao? Qin Feng was slightly surprised, but then he sneered. A mere will without any intelligence dares to oppose me? Not to mention that you haven't developed your own intelligence. Even if you had developed your own will and turned it into the Sun Saint God, you wouldn't be able to stop me. This spirit sea is my spirit sea after all. Qin Feng made a grabbing motion with his finger, and a huge aura that far surpassed the Sun Star appeared, instantly suppressing the enormous will within the Sun Star. An invisible force directly broke through the outer barrier of the Sun Star and went straight into the depths of Mountain Paradise. The center of the Sun Star was incomparably hot, with rolling flames surging. The rich light origin power condensed into a terrifying blazing white flame. Nothing could resist this flame. Even a top-notch ancestor god would be destroyed in body and soul if they touched a trace of this flame. In the depths of the blazing white flame, there was an even more terrifying pale golden flame. It was a kind of divine origin fire. When his consciousness touched it slightly, Qin Feng vaguely felt that it seemed to be able to hurt a greater thousand worlds expert. It was just that he was no ordinary greater thousand worlds expert. Now, he was about to step into the greater thousand worlds expert realm. A huge amount of divine power suppressed the Sun Star's origin power, and a huge invisible force broke through the Sun Star's defense. Rumble. Qin Feng tried his best to suppress it, so that the aura of the two sides did not leak out at all. However, a terrifying phenomenon still occurred deep within the Sun Star. Many of the experts who were passing through the natural trials couldn't help but be shocked when they felt that power. It was as if he would be turned into dust at any time during the battle. What a powerful force! Did Yuanshi make a move? The great Sun Demon Emperor, the Phoenix Clan, the radiant ancestral god, the brilliant battle god, all the ancient ancestral gods of the radiant ancestral god, had ugly looks on their faces. Their minds were shaken. Such terrifying power caused their hearts to tremble and despair. The ancestor god was known as a quasi-major world realm expert. He was only one step away from the major world realm expert. However, the gap between them was like a heavenly moat. Through the invisible changes, Qin Feng had already seen through the secrets in the depths of the sun. The origin spiritual treasure had been completely exposed before his eyes. It was a pool, a jade-white pool formed by the Sun Star and the origin of the Spirit Sea. In the depths of the Sun Star, there was a boundless pale golden flame. There was a huge spiritual light of the great path in it. It seemed to have merged with the Sun Star. The Sun Star's boundless original source was poured into it, growing and multiplying endlessly. The acquired origin spiritual treasure, the radiant fortune pool, born from the acquired laws of light. The Sun Star in the void of time was the leader of the billions of stars. It stole the fate of the billions of stars, gave birth to the Golden Crow race and the Star Tao Supreme Treasure, the Eastern Emperor Bell. In the Spirit Sea, the leader of the billions of stars was the primeval star. The Star Tao Supreme Treasure would only be born in the primeval star. However, the Sun Star and the Moon Star were also irreplaceable. The Sun Star was the source of billions of light. It gathered the fate of the radiant race. In addition to the appearance of the heavenly secrets, the radiant origin spiritual treasure was born. The radiant fortune pool was not an offensive spiritual treasure, but in terms of developing a force or even assisting the cultivation of the origin sacred grounds overlords, it was miraculous and unimaginable. The most heaven-defying thing about it was that it could go against the innate heavens and create an innate celestial body, an innate origin celestial body. What was an innate origin celestial body? It was the body of an innate deity king, innate deity emperor, or even an innate celestial monarch. Just how heaven-defying was this? With it, one would soon be able to form a massive celestial system and force. One must know that not every world was like the Spirit Sea, with countless innate celestial beings. This was especially true for those who ascended from the small and great world. Qin Feng was tempted, but he gave up in the end. At this time, he really couldn't act rashly. If he touched the radiant fortune pool now, it would be considered as completely destroying the Spirit Sea's heaven and earth momentum, which would greatly affect the Spirit Sea's evolution. It would affect the Spirit Sea's normal evolution, as well as the Spirit Sea's future evolution. Although, his force could indeed turn the situation around. Qin Feng glanced at the radiant fortune pool deep in the sun star, his eyes flashing. If he wanted to get his hands on this item, he would have endless time to plan in the future. With a flash, he disappeared from this part of the void and returned to the Ling Shao Heavenly Palace. He was not far from the breakthrough now. What a pity! In the void, in the origin ocean, a figure was looking at the place where the sun star was under the colorful glow. Seeing that the primordial lord did not make a move in the end, the creator primordial spirit sighed. He hoped that the primeval Lord God would intervene forcefully, and it would be best if he could snatch away the radiant origin spiritual treasure directly. If he went against the trend, he would definitely be spurned by the Spirit Sea's origin, and even suffer a backlash. At that time, he could use the opportunity to regain the origin's favor and reach the Tao validation realm earlier than the primeval Lord God. The Genesis primordial spirit merely sighed, and then his eyes calmed down as he looked at the blazing depths of the sun star. No matter what, he should have the upper hand now, and the situation in the Spirit Sea was more in his favor. The primeval Lord God seemed to be sitting on the huge Spirit Sea divine system, and even mastered the heavenly Tao, suppressing all living beings and possessing great strength. But in reality, this was not of much help to the Tao validation realm. On the contrary, although he was trapped in a corner and did not even dare to run out of the origin, it was not a big deal. One could imagine that the radiant origin saint god would be born soon. If he was in a different place, and if he was the primeval Lord God, there would not be another master in his backyard. He would definitely kill the radiant origin saint god. As a powerful saint god born from the origin, the radiant origin saint god would not be too weak. A few breaths, he just needed to buy a few breaths of time. Then he would have the confidence to break through the great thousand-world level and become an innate saint god who mastered the innate power law. He looked in the direction of the Ling Shao Heavenly Palace, and his eyes were cold and filled with a sneer. Primeval Lord God, everything you have is destined to be mine. Chapter 1545. It had been 200 years since many powerful light-type powerhouses entered the depths of the Sun Star to fight for the position of Master of the Holy Land. In these 200 years, apart from the many light-type powerhouses who were eager to try, most of the gods had left the periphery of the Sun Star and returned to the Spirit Sea. After all, the Spirit Sea was the focus of all the gods. However, the gods of the Fire Tribe had not left yet. In these 200 years, the gods of the Fire Tribe had improved by leaps and bounds. Most of the gods of the Fire Tribe had used the wisp of light origin energy from the Sun Star to improve their abilities. Those with outstanding talent had not only broken through one small realm, but also 2 small realms, or even 3 small realms. There were also close to 100 gods of the Fire Tribe, and 5 or 6 divine emperors of the Fire Tribe who had broken through. It turned out that the gods of the Fire Tribe, who were inferior among the 8 tribes, were now comparable to the most powerful gods of the Water Tribe and the gods of the Mountain Tribe. Of course, the gods of the Fire Tribe had not only increased their strength, because they had absorbed a wisp of light origin energy. The most important thing was that they had conquered the third newly born Greater Thousand World. Affected by the light origin energy from the light origin sacred land, a huge Greater Thousand World was ahead of the other greater worlds and grew into a Greater Thousand World first. The third Greater Thousand World in the Spirit Sea. It was a huge Greater Thousand World that was mainly fire-type. Perhaps because of the extreme radiation from the Sun Star, this newly born Greater Thousand World was filled with terrifyingly hot magma. Abnormally terrifying spiritual fires were everywhere, and there were no living creatures. It could be said that only fire-type creatures were born in the magma. To other factions, a greater thousand world like this could only be used as a fire-type spiritual mine or a place to concoct spiritual medicine. Its use was limited. However, to the gods of the fire tribe, it was like a fish in water. After conquering the greater thousand world, the gods of the fire tribe were the third major faction in the spirit sea to have a greater thousand world as their foundation. This attracted the attention of many factions. Even within the spirit sea god system, there were many gods who were envious. For a time, the light origin sacred land attracted countless factions of various sizes to join in, setting off a wave of conquering a greater thousand world. In the Lingshao heavenly palace, Yi Futian sat on the divine throne and seemed to be in harmony with the rules of heaven and earth. On the divine throne, above Qin Feng's head, an ethereal aura grew stronger day by day. Among the 3 flowers above his head, the second lotus of the great path became more and more real. Vaguely, it seemed that the great path of the innate universe was descending. Amidst the great Tao lotus flower, the grayish book on one side emitted a dense innate spiritual light that was so dense that it was almost tangible. The universe book was about to advance into an innate spiritual treasure. Soon, universe is about to reach perfection. Qin Feng slowly woke up from his meditation. The 3,000-year period was about to arrive. Now, his understanding of the innate universe Tao had reached perfection. Once the universe, innate Tao seed reached perfection, he would be able to attempt the Tao fusing. He opened his eyes and surveyed the world with his wisdom eyes. At this moment, 6 innate Tao laws had been born in his spirit sea. They were the innate universe Tao, innate creation Tao, innate force Tao, innate time Tao, innate void Tao, and innate slaughter Tao. The innate void Tao and innate slaughter Tao were born not long ago. They were stimulated by a part of the chaos evil god's essence that was refined. The appearance of each innate Tao represented the strengthening and expansion of the spirit sea. All these years, the only 2 Xing gods in the spirit sea and some ancestral gods in the quasi-world layers could vaguely sense the changes. The world was getting wider, the earth was getting thicker, the sky was getting clearer, and the mountains and rivers were getting bigger, more majestic, and more majestic. Things weren't looking too good for him. Qin Feng could sense that many ancestral gods were secretly preparing to fuse with the innate Tao. Once the 3,000-year period was over, there were so many ancestor gods in the spirit sea, and most of them were outstanding talents in the past. Even though the probability of them breaking through to the level of a great thousand world was extremely low, there were bound to be people who succeeded given the large number of ancestor gods. Qin Feng calmed his mind and used the supreme Tao heart to eliminate the distracting thoughts in his Tao heart. An apathetic, distant, and self-contained supreme Tao heart returned to the Book of Universe, and his Yuan spirit sank into it. But not long after, Qin Feng was awakened again. "Greetings, Your Majesty." On the divine throne, Qin Feng frowned slightly as he looked at the heroic ancestral god of the dragon race below the main hall. "Ao Qing, Lord of the dragon race and master of water gods. Why aren't you in the East Sea Dragon Palace managing the water net? Is there something important?" Qin Feng asked calmly. Ao Qing's expression was solemn, and his voice was low. "Your Majesty, His Majesty Tai Xian, has sent word that the Western Dragon Race's fleet is approaching the chaos. Their target seems to be the Spirit Sea." "What? The Western Dragon Race's fleet is approaching the Spirit Sea? How is that possible? Why would the Western Dragon Race target the Spirit Sea?" Some of the powerful gods in the hall were shocked. For a moment, a panicked atmosphere appeared in the hall. These gods were mostly primordial and primordial experts. They had come into contact with some of the god systems and had some understanding of the situation outside the Spirit Sea. The Western Dragon Race was a famous superpower in the Chaos Sea. They were infamous, and the number of god systems that had been destroyed at the hands of the Western Dragon Race had exceeded the double digit. Many powerful innate sacred gods had even fallen at the hands of the Western dragon race. But when the gods looked at the primordial Lord God, who was sitting on the throne with an unchanging expression, the panic in their hearts calmed down. Why would the Western dragon race target the Spirit Sea? On the throne, Qin Feng's expression remained unchanged, but his heart was shaken. As far as he knew, the Western dragon race's forces were not in this area. Logically speaking, there was no reason for them to target this world group. At the same time, a heavy feeling appeared in his heart. The Western dragon race was not like those scattered god system alliances. Even with his current strength and the inescapable net, he might not be able to withstand the fierce attacks of such a huge god system. Even though his heart was shaken, Qin Feng's expression did not change as he looked at Ao Qing. Did the Supreme Mystery Dragon Lord say how long it will take for the Western dragon race to reach this world group? As soon as he said that, the gods looked closely at Ao Qing. Ao Qing said in a low voice, "At most 10 years, at least 5 years." What, only 5 years? The gods' expressions changed drastically. 5 years, the gods would take more than 5 years to take a nap. 5 years was too short. The gods did not have time to make any adjustments or respond. On the throne, although Qin Feng's expression did not change, his heart sank. 5 years was too short. To break through again and become a level 17 world monarch within 5 years was too hasty. Chapter 1546. If he could break through to the 17th level, coupled with the power of the Spirit Sea, Qin Feng would not be afraid of any god system at all. However, although he was only half a step away from the 17th level, he was still too far away. Qin Feng had no confidence at all, even if he had to give up the Spirit Sea to protect himself. Qin Feng raised his head and looked down at the hall. Many deities' faces were filled with fear, their expressions absent-minded and pale. Their appearances were extremely unbearable. Frowning, Qin Feng looked at Ao Qing and pondered for a moment. Qin Feng's expression changed. "Mystery Dragon Lord, do you know who the Western dragon race sent this time?" Ao Qing raised her head to look at Qin Feng and shook her head slightly. According to the information Mystery Dragon Lord received from Mystery Dragon Lord, 2 of the 4 most famous Lords of Calamity of the Western dragon race will come. Even the Apocalypse Lord might take action. Ao Qing's tone was heavy. The 4 Lords of Calamity were the 4 most famous innate holy gods of the Western dragon race. 2 of them were rumored to have broken through to the Great Thousand World level. If that was all, the Spirit Sea might not have room to maneuver. But with the Apocalypse Lord, Ao Qing looked at the Master God on the throne. "Your Majesty, Mystery Dragon Lord suggests that you consider a way out. If your Majesty is willing, he suggests that you go to the Origin Divine World. Mystery Dragon Lord can take in the Spirit Sea gods." As soon as he said that, the eyes of many gods in the hall lit up. They looked at the Master God on the throne with a burning gaze. The Great Void Dragon Lord was one of the famous Second Step Dragon Lords under the Purple Jade Dragon Lord in the Origin Divine World. If they could join the Great Void Dragon Lord, even the Western dragon race would not dare to kill them. Join the Great Void Dragon Lord? Qin Feng sneered in his heart. If the huge Spirit Sea God system fell into the hands of the Great Void Dragon Lord, even their skin and bones would be eaten. Qin Feng pondered. If it was just the 4 Lords of Calamity it would be fine, but there was also the Apocalypse Lord. The Apocalypse Lord was rumored to be a 3rd step god of the Western dragon race. In the vast Chaos Sea, the Chaos Sea. Although a 16th level innate saint god was known as a world-class expert, he didn't even have the right to walk the chaos. Only after breaking through the 17th level would one truly have the qualifications to walk in the endless chaos. Such an expert, even in the 33 heavens, was in existence with an outstanding status. Compared to a 3rd step lord, he was still a far cry. The third step Doomsday Lord was definitely not someone the Spirit Sea could deal with. However, Qin Feng was not at the end of his rope. His eyes flashed with a hint of ferocity. He was not without a backer. He still had another identity. The 13th Buddhist Lord of the primordial world. If he was angered, he would lure all the Tao ancestors of the primordial world over. There were more than 30 Tao ancestors, more than 5 or 6 Tao ancestors at the third step, and Tao ancestor Hongjun. The Western Dragon Clan and the Origin Divine World were all gone. Qin Feng's face was gloomy. If it wasn't necessary, he really didn't want to take this path. Although the primal chaos sea was chaotic and had many divine systems, it contained great fortune. If he could take all the big and small worlds and the 33 heavens into his arms, he might be able to break through to the 18th level in the primal chaos sea. Once the primordial world experts interfered, it would not be so easy for him to break through to the 18th level in an era given the power of the primordial world Tao ancestors. However, the crisis was imminent. It was urgent. Qin Feng inclined his head, his gaze landing on Ao Qing as he calmly spoke. Thank the great Void Dragon Lord on my behalf. I will consider this matter carefully. You may leave. Qin Feng waved his hand. Ao Qing bowed respectfully and retreated. Among the gods, Qin Feng seemed to be deliberately rejecting the great Void Dragon Lord. Immediately, a god became anxious and stood out. Your Majesty, this lowly god thinks that it is an excellent choice for us to head to the Origin Divine World now? Yes, Your Majesty. The Origin Divine World is abnormally vast and sparsely populated. It is indeed an excellent place to go. Fighting to the death with the Western Dragon race is like throwing an egg against a rock. It is really not the best plan. Your Majesty must make a decision soon. Yes, only 5 years. It wasn't just this god. The 8 division god organizations of the Spirit Sea, as well as the many god king residences, all stood out. On the throne, Qin Feng frowned. The battle hadn't even begun, but so many people were already scared out of their wits. Your Majesty! At this moment, the Plague Division Great Heavenly Venerate stood up. At this moment, Qin Feng's expression changed. He felt a strange fluctuation appear in the depths of the Creator's space. With a raised brow, Qin Feng glanced at the Plague Division Great Heavenly Venerate. When the Plague Division Great Heavenly Venerate saw Qin Feng's expression, he felt a chill in his heart and hurriedly returned to his throne. At this moment, this Master God was clearly in a rather bad mood. If they angered this Master God, they would not have a good ending. On the throne, Qin Feng looked at the agitated group of gods and said indifferently, "You may leave now. All of you can leave. I have my own plans for this matter." Some of the gods were still unwilling and were about to speak again. "Are you all treating my words like farts?" Looking up, Qin Feng's tone was already laced with killing intent. The gods felt a chill run down their spines, and their expressions changed drastically. The Dark North Divine Emperor walked out from the side and looked at the gods with a sharp gaze. Still not leaving? Do you all really want to walk on the gods' scraping platform? The gods' expressions changed drastically, and they hurriedly knelt. This lowly god spoke without thinking, "But we would never dare to offend your Majesty. Please forgive us, Your Majesty." The group of deities was truly terrified. When the Emperor was angry, blood would flow and millions of corpses would fall. This celestial Emperor was no weakling. Over the years, there was no lack of powerful gods who angered the celestial Emperor and were dragged onto the god's scraping platform. Qin Feng looked at these gods. He did not have the time to bicker with them now. "All of you leave. From today onwards, all the gods will be in charge of the inescapable net. No gods are allowed to leave their posts without permission. Otherwise, they will be punished according to the heavenly rules." The celestial Emperor's words were like gold, and the laws of heaven and earth were clear. The heavenly rules of the inescapable net were directly manifested in the sky. The vast phenomenon was like thunder and lightning, pressing down on the gods until their faces turned ashen. All the gods were dumbstruck. Many of the gods who harbored ulterior motives even felt the manifestation of the heavenly Tao's restrictions. It was as if they could see through the darkness in their hearts. Even their divine souls and divine kingdoms were almost locked down and destroyed. Qin Feng looked coldly at some of the gods who were making the most of a fuss. If not for the powerful ripple from the over-god space, he would not have been stingy with his butcher's knife. His figure flashed, and he disappeared from the hall. The next moment, he appeared on top of a huge world tree through the over-god space. Chapter 1547. After exiting the Lingshao Palace, Qin Feng appeared in the Overgod Hall in the center of the Overgod space. The enormous Overgod Hall was filled with boundless power, and the huge white ball of light in the center suppressed the entire Overgod space. That was the Overgod. No, it should be called the Heavenly Tao now. Qin Feng personally hatched a Heavenly Tao seed. Apart from the strange instinct of backlash, the Heavenly Tao seed was far superior to the chaotic Heavenly Tao in both its deduction ability and its ability to sort out the Heavenly Tao laws. Countless pieces of information regarding the fusion of the Overgod space and the Spirit Sea were clearly displayed on the huge silver-white screen in front of the Overgod Hall. The various key points were clearly distinguished by various colors. At every moment, there seemed to be countless mysterious runes flashing across the screen in the form of accurate data, including the increase in the concentration of the connate spiritual qi in the Overgod space, the increase in the number and variety of living beings, the time when the connate gods were born, and the trajectory of their growth. Every fortuitous encounter, every calamity, and every tribulation of love that he had encountered. Even their destinies had been completely digitized. There were clear and complete reports on which innate gods had obtained the fortune, which innate gods would be unlucky, and which innate gods had completely perished. Apart from the data outside the Overgod space, there were also complete data records, analyses, and deductions of the Land of Stars and the Faerun crystal wall on the other screens. The data of all beings in the Spirit Sea was also transmitted to the Overgod space. Compared to the boundless monitoring power of the nets above snares below, the heavenly axiom of the Creator space had a complete data analysis even for an ant. It was due to this that once the reincarnators from the extraterritorial world entered, even if they were innate holy gods like Torch Dragon who possessed a complete concealment technique, they would be detected by the Heavenly Tao in the shortest time possible. It was the Heavenly Tao in the Overgod space that had found tens of thousands of reincarnators in the past 1,000 years. However, the Heavenly Tao had only been formed for less than 1,000 years, and there were still many incomplete data and some aspects that were lacking. At the same time, it also needed to refine some auxiliary modules to perfectly unleash the Heavenly Tao's power. Qin Feng just glanced at it and waved his hand. A green light flew out from a side palace in the void and suddenly fell on his palm. It was a green leaf, a special green leaf. A jade-like pattern appeared. When Qin Feng grabbed it, a message appeared in his mind. After pondering for a moment, Qin Feng waved his sleeve and an invisible force entered the green leaf. Buzz! As if some restriction had been undone, the green leaf gradually transformed into an illusory figure that exuded a hazy brilliance. Qin Feng, it's not easy to meet you. A sweet and slightly warm female voice sounded in the Creator space. The holy god of life, Lu Qi, appeared. She looked at Qin Feng in amazement. Qin Feng's management of the Spirit Sea was beyond imagination. Impenetrable and impregnable were not enough to describe the current Spirit Sea. Your Majesty. Qin Feng nodded slightly. Qin Feng's expression was indifferent. What a boring guy. The sacred life god shook her head. She decided not to beat around the bush and went straight to the point. Qin Feng, Do you know that Taoist creation and the Western dragon race have joined forces to make trouble for you? Qin Feng looked at the holy god of life in surprise. The Eastern wilderness god system also knows about this? The holy god of life was surprised to see Qin Feng's expression. You seem to already know? But then she understood. Right, given your relationship with the origin god world's dragon race, they should have already informed you. No matter what, I still have to thank your majesty. Hearing this, Qin Feng still shook his head. Rather than icing on the cake, it was better to provide timely assistance. To be able to deliver a message when the Western Dragon Race army was pressing down on the border was extremely precious, even though this information was no longer useful to him. Your Majesty, Qin Feng is too polite. If it weren't for your Majesty's help last time, the Eastern Wilderness God system would have collapsed. The Holy God of Life looked at Qin Feng with her beautiful eyes. To be honest, even now, her heart was calm as she looked at Qin Feng. She had personally watched Qin Feng slowly progress from the God King realm to where he was now. To be able to break through from the God King realm to the greater thousand world realm in just a few years was already shocking enough. In countless greater thousand worlds, in countless eras, countless talented geniuses had been god emperors and ancestral gods, but they still could not step into the greater thousand world realm. For Qin Feng to be able to break through in one go was truly embarrassing. But the holy god of life could never have imagined that Qin Feng's strength would soar so quickly in just 1,000 years. In just 1,000 years, he had reached the peak of rank 16. According to the Eastern Wilderness Overgod, Qin Feng was only one step away from becoming a rank 17 greater thousand world king. And it had only been 3,000 years. Even the word genius was not enough to describe this person's shocking talent. After pondering for a moment, the holy god of life glanced at Qin Feng, and a stream of light flashed through her eyes. Your Majesty, Qin Feng, if I'm not wrong, your Majesty should be about to take that final step. Qin Feng glanced at the holy god of life. With her strength, the holy god of life would not be able to see through his cultivation. However, he had no intention of hiding it. Your Majesty, life is right. In 60 years, or 100 years, I will be able to break through to the greater thousand world realm. A hint of shock and disbelief flashed across the holy god of life's face. Although she had already believed the Eastern Wilderness Overgod's speculation, it was not as shocking as hearing Qin Feng admit it himself. After a moment of thought, the holy god of life suddenly looked at Qin Feng with a serious gaze. If the Eastern Wilderness God system can buy 200 years for your Majesty, what are the chances of your Majesty attaining Tao? Qin Feng's eyes lit up as he looked at the holy god of life in surprise. Did the holy god of life mean that the Eastern Wilderness God system would help him? Seeing that the holy god of life was not joking, Qin Feng fell silent for a moment. Then, he raised a hand and made a gesture. 60%? Seeing Qin Feng's thumb and pinky, the holy god of life could not believe her eyes. 60%? It's actually 60%? For a peak rank 16 innate holy god to become a rank 17 greater thousand world king, the difficulty was slightly lower than the first Tao integration. However, even if it was slightly lower than the first Tao integration, it was already very rare for an innate holy god to have a 10% chance. And Qin Feng said it was 60%? This was simply a fantasy. Chapter 1548. Of course, this was not just a fantasy. Possessing a complete upper world of the 33 skies meant that his success rate at the second Tao integration was far higher than that of ordinary innate saint god. In addition, Qin Feng also possessed the Connate Universe Great Tao and the Connate Spirit Treasure Universe book that was about to evolve. Possessing a Connate Spirit Treasure alone could increase his chances of reaching Tao integration by more than 50%. Of course, the sacred god of life did not understand this. Connate Spirit Treasures were far too rare. Firstly, the 33 skies typically only had a few connate Tao laws, and connate spirit treasures were even rarer. Secondly, most spirit treasures that were born when resonating with heaven and earth were born would usually be destroyed during the process of Tao integration. Or, someone might take them early and interrupt the process. Seeing Qin Feng's confident expression, the sacred god of life could not see any sign of him pretending at all. She was even more incredulous. 60%, this was simply an impossible probability. 60% was almost certain to reach Tao integration. No wonder His Majesty of the Eastern Wilderness thinks so highly of you and did not hesitate to owe that existence a huge favor. The sacred god of life was inwardly shocked. She calmed herself down slightly and looked at Qin Feng with her beautiful eyes as she spoke in a cold voice. Qin Feng, His Majesty of the Eastern Barren Territory, in order to thank you for your help last time, he is willing to fight for another 200 years for you. I hope you can break through within 200 years. Qin Feng fell silent. He had to admit that he felt like he was breathing a long sigh of relief. To him, 200 years was a rather generous period of time. However, he still owed a huge favor. Qin Feng raised his head and looked at the sacred god of life. Thank His Majesty of the Eastern Wilderness for me. Tell His Majesty that Qin Feng will definitely repay this favor one day. The sacred god of life's beautiful eyes flickered. In that case, I will congratulate Your Majesty in advance for your successful breakthrough. With that, the sacred god of life disappeared from the overgod space. After watching the sacred god of life leave, Qin Feng pondered for a moment before entering a state of comprehension. 200 years passed in the blink of an eye, and the Genesis primordial spirit was not much different from him. Her aura was about to be perfected, and she would begin to prove her Tao. Within the primal chaos, the endless primal chaos fog didn't disperse for a long time. When it was calm, it was like a quiet little woman, eternally serene. But when it went berserk, it was like a merciless beast that could turn into an endless storm and devour everything in the primal chaos. Within a large area of chaotic fog, hundreds of enormous overgod battleships were arrayed. They slowly cruised through the primordial chaos as a suppressive force moved about. At the center was a gray, chaotic battleship. An oppressive force seemed to suppress the chaotic void for billions of miles. Master, why did the Eastern Wilderness ask you to stop the Western Dragon race? He doesn't seem to have any grudges with the experts of the Western Dragon clan. On the deck of the battleship, several figures looked at the chaotic fog outside the deck. They were looking at a purple-robed old man sitting cross-legged at the front of the battleship. The purple-robed old man was surrounded by dense, hazy, purple primordial aura. At times, he looked like an ordinary old man, but at other times, he seemed to have melded into the boundless primal chaos, disappearing without a trace. The several figures also had powerful auras. Their might that transcended the myriad worlds leaked out slightly, as if the laws of heaven and earth had descended directly. Two of them had auras that far surpassed ordinary innate sacred gods. Junior brother Yuanxiang, the Eastern Wilderness has always been a man who doesn't act until he sees a rabbit. He won't shoot without thinking. I'm afraid he has other plans. The other existence under the Saint God's banner pondered for a moment before smiling. It's just resisting the Western Dragon divine system for 200 years. This isn't difficult for our primordial divine system. I believe the Western Dragon divine system won't dare to not give face to Master. The several powerful sacred gods on the battleship nodded slightly. The primordial divine system wasn't an ordinary divine system. They dominated the primordial continent and had countless primordial divine gods under their command. They were also an overlord in the origin divine world. The Western Dragon divine system's Doomsday King was strong, but he was no match for the master of primordial divine system. It's just that the Eastern Wilderness sacred god's aptitude is really amazing. An innate sacred god sighed. Hearing this, several sacred gods looked at each other. To be accepted as disciples by the master of primordial divine system, they were undoubtedly the top geniuses in heaven and earth. Even among the many higher worlds around the origin divine world, they were famous. They were above countless geniuses and ghosts. However, compared to the Eastern Wilderness sacred god, the many sacred gods felt ashamed of their inferiority even though they were extremely proud. I'm afraid the Eastern Wilderness sacred god is very close to the 18th order of the third step. In just a short era, he has already reached this step. Once he breaks through, it will shake the entire primal chaos sea. There's also that great heavenly demon. That demon race expert is also a peerless genius. He isn't inferior to the Eastern Wilderness sacred god. The demon race has been full of ambition in recent years. They are constantly thinking about conquering the origin divine world. Several sacred gods communicated with each other through divine thoughts. Their eyes were filled with admiration. Although sacred gods were known as existences of the great thousand worlds and were above billions of living beings and gods, they were still insignificant in the vast primal chaos sea. At this time, the purple-robed old man at the front of the battleship suddenly opened his eyes. Buzz. Wherever his gaze passed, it was as if time had stopped and the primal chaos had stopped flowing. The sacred gods' expressions changed as they looked toward the depths of the primal chaos. They're here. On the other side of the primal chaos, hundreds of enormous battleships were flying out at an extremely fast speed. The Eastern Wilderness upper realm, where many gods were gathered. 1,000 years ago, the dark clouds of the primal chaos evil god, barbarian ancestor, and East Pole divine system's pursuit had dispersed. The Eastern Wilderness divine system had suffered a great loss in the beginning. Most of the worlds outside had been destroyed, and even one of the 6 sacred gods under the Eastern Wilderness master god had died. However, thanks to Qin Feng's intervention, the Eastern Wilderness divine system had won the encirclement of the other 3 divine systems. Among the 3 divine systems, the East Pole divine system had suffered a counterattack. 4 of their sacred gods had died, and the East Pole Master God had become a general without an army. He had swallowed a part of the Eastern Wilderness divine system's worlds and spat out almost all of their resources. When he returned to the origin divine world, he had lost his wings and was also attacked by the other divine systems. In the blink of an eye, the East Pole divine system had disappeared, leaving only the East Pole Saint God. The barbarian race under the barbarian ancestor did not gain any benefit. When they were besieging the Eastern Wilderness upper realm, the Eastern Wilderness Master God had his ally, the Sway Sovereign Divine System, launch a sneak attack on the barbarian race's headquarters. The entire barbarian race was torn apart, and the entire race was divided among the smaller divine systems that took advantage of the situation. The barbarian ancestor himself was suppressed by the Eastern Wilderness Master God and the Sway Sovereign. Chapter 1549. The only Chaos Evil God was a Lone Ranger. In addition, he was lured to the Spirit Sea by the Chaos Evil God, so he managed to escape the Eastern Wilderness over God's revenge. However, he suffered a great loss at the hands of Qin Feng. His strength was reduced to less than 10%, so he could only hide in a corner of the chaos space. Above the divine court, space-time rippled slightly, and an emerald stream of light flew out from the space-time gap and landed in the hands of a beautiful goddess in a green dress. For a moment, all the gods in the divine court looked at the goddess in green dress. She grabbed it and sensed the information in it. Shock flashed through her eyes, and she bowed slightly toward the overgod in the divine court. "Your Majesty, I have contacted His Majesty Qin Feng." She paused for a moment, then bowed toward the Eastern Wilderness overgod. "Just as Your Majesty expected, he is indeed about to attain the Tao. His Majesty Qin Feng asked me to tell Your Majesty that he will repay your kindness one day." Impossible, your majesty. Didn't you say that he attained the Tao less than 3,000 years ago? As soon as he finished speaking, a god cried out. Some gods found it hard to believe. It was not just the god who spoke. Almost all the gods in the Eastern barren godly court could not believe their ears. Attaining the Tao in 1,000 years, and then reaching the peak of the great 1,000 worlds in 2,000 years. This was unheard of. What could a god do in 3,000 years? It was not enough for one seclusion. It was just a nap. In the divine court, several holy gods were also shocked. Although the overlord of the eastern wilderness had already made up his mind, the crowd still felt a shock that they had never felt before assaulting their understanding of the world. It was a very absurd feeling. In the past, the eastern wilderness overgod and the great heavenly demon of the demon race were known as the strongest in their era, but they also took almost an era to reach the peak of the great 1,000 world. No wonder your majesty is helping him fight against the dragon race of the west, and even asked the master of primordial chaos to help. Such talent is terrifying. Once he grows up, he will be a strong support for the eastern wilderness divine court. The holy god of annihilation, who was born from the great destruction, said slowly. Annihilation, you think too much. Do you think your majesty will care about a so-called peerless genius? The goddess of misfortune glanced at the saint god of annihilation. So what if he's a genius? There are countless worlds and countless spacetimes. How many geniuses have been born? No matter how talented he is, he may not be able to break through the 17th level of the great 1,000 worlds. Amidst the faint voice, all the gods fell on the goddess of misfortune. She lifted her chin slightly and gazed at the eastern barren territory's throne. Her eyes were filled with pride. Even if he's lucky enough to break through to rank 17, His Majesty is about to complete the accumulation of rank 3. Once he breaks through, will His Majesty need a mere rank 2 Lord ally? The holy god of annihilation was stunned speechless by the goddess of misfortune's words. He was not angry. The goddess of misfortune was born from the great path of misfortune and had always been like this. On the other side, sacred god Earth Mother, sacred god Life, and sacred god Luck also had proud expressions on their faces. Although the misfortune goddess had a disagreeable personality, what she said was not wrong. At the Eastern Wilderness Overlord's level, he no longer needed any allies. Even if he did, only the Master of Primordial Chaos and the Sway Sovereign were qualified to be his allies. After spending an era together, the three sacred gods understood the Eastern Wilderness Overlord's personality very well. This time, he was probably just doing it casually to repay the Primordial Origin Overlord's help and not because he wanted to promote a junior. The Eastern Wilderness Overlord had always been protective and had never promoted a junior outside of the god system. At the same time, he did not like anyone else. Your Majesty Life, have you asked that Qin Feng how confident he is in confirming his Tao? In the god system, an ancestral god slowly asked. The sacred god of life looked over and saw that it was a primal chaos ancestral god. A powerful ancestral god who cultivated the innate primal chaos laws. In the eyes of the sacred gods, he was one of the few powerful ancestral gods with the highest chance of becoming a Tao enlightened. Originally, in the Eastern Wilderness divine system, his chances of becoming a Tao enlightened were higher than the goddess of life, Lu Qi. Hearing this, all the gods in the hall couldn't help but look at the sacred god of life. All the gods could not help but feel curious. This question was on the minds of all the gods. Even the sacred gods were burning with curiosity. Generally speaking, whether it was an ancestral god breaking through to the greater 1,000 world level or a greater 1,000 world level expert breaking through to the 17th level, there would be some degree of confidence. This confidence was born from an expert's own foundation, luck, and intuition. Even if there was a slight error in the estimation, it would not be too big. What is the probability? The goddess of misfortune could not help but look at the sacred god of life with her pair of eyes that contained a mysterious power. The sacred god of life fell silent as she looked at the gods around her and met the gazes of the powerful gods. After a short moment, she made a hand gesture. It was exactly the same as the hand gesture Qin Feng made back then. 60%, less than 10%? The gods looked at each other and understood. This probability was not much different from what they had guessed. To reach the peak of the greater thousand world-level expert in 3,000 years, with such speed, how could his foundation be solid? His accumulation was probably quite weak. 60% is quite good. The primal chaos ancestral god nodded slightly. The goddess of fortune's eyes were calm as she spoke. Indeed, that primeval sovereign was able to reach this step in such a short time, and even has a 60% chance of proving his Tao. That is quite good. The sacred god of Earth Mother, the goddess of misfortune, and the sacred god of annihilation's expressions did not change, but a mysterious light flickered in their eyes. 60% was actually a little higher than what they had guessed in their hearts, and it was quite unexpected. However, this probability was not high, and the probability of failure was very high. 3,000 years was too short. Cultivating fast did not mean that one would have the last laugh. Sometimes, the path of the middle might not be worse than that of a genius. It was a pity that they had to ask the master of primordial chaos for help this time. The sacred life god silently looked at the group of smiling gods. She coughed dryly, slightly attracting the god's attention. It's not 60%, it's 60%. The entire hall was abnormally silent. Many pairs of eyes looked at the sacred god of life without focus. What a joke! 60%? How is that possible? 60%. On the giant throne in the center, the eastern wilderness overlord opened his eyes for the first time. He looked at the sacred god of life with a trace of surprise in his eyes. However, he immediately closed his eyes again. So what if it's 60%? Without a real breakthrough, even the highest probability is just empty talk. It's just a slightly bigger ant. Dear brothers, I've been updating continuously for nearly 400 days. Counting it, ever since I started updating, I've been updating 4 times a day on average. No matter how busy I am, I haven't stopped updating. I should be worthy of all the recommendation tickets, subscriptions, and monthly vote. However, this is just the beginning. Let's continue to charge forward and create a miracle for 500 days, or even 1,000 days. Chapter 1550. As he pondered, the East Baron Overgod focused his attention on the third step of the 18th rank Overgod realm. According to the information he received from the Sway Sovereign and the Grand Mist Overlord, in less than an era, there would be a huge revolution in the primal chaos. In the midst of the revolution, calamities and opportunities would follow. The stronger one was, the greater the benefits one could obtain. This was a great opportunity that had never been seen before. In recent years, the extremely rare 33 Heavens Upper Realms had appeared in the primal chaos. Every few dozen eras, a new 33 Heavens Upper Realm would be born. This in itself was an omen. Sky Demon Great World. In the Dragon Origin Sea where the dragon race resided, all kinds of true dragons played to their heart's content. As they played, they stirred up the clouds and lightning, bathed in lightning, and breathed out ice and fire. In the depths of the Dragon Origin Sea, there was a huge dragon gate. The dragon gate faintly emitted an innate dragon origin aura, forming countless waterfalls. Numerous flood dragons with dragon blood gathered under the waterfalls, charging at the dragon gate. Roar, roar! From time to time, carps, snakes, centipedes, and other spiritual beasts with dragon blood would jump over the dragon gate. They would be baptized by the innate dragon origin chi and become new members of the true dragon race. This was the origin of the Sky Demon Great World's dragon race. Although the dragon race called themselves divine beasts, They were also part of the monster race and held an important position in the Sky Demon god system. However, all the god systems in the Primal Chaos Sea knew that the dragon race in the Sky Demon Great World's Dragon Origin Sea was only a branch of the Eastern Heavenly Dragon race. The Eastern Heavenly Dragon race's main camp was still in the vast and mysterious Origin Divine World. In the depths of the Dragon Origin Sea, there was an enormous and boundless Chaos Dragon vein. Extremely dense Origin Dragon Chi leaked out from it. Along this enormous Chaos Dragon vein, there were many palaces and jade palaces, just like soaring heavenly dragons. In the Dragon Palace, there were countless pearls, jade, scallops, and crystal-like dragon crystals embedded in it. The dense dragon chi didn't make it seem majestic. There were also many pearl maidens, shell maidens, and beautiful dragon race girls walking around. In the central dragon court, the 4 dragon lords of the dragon race were discussing. Your Majesty Great Void, the 9 underworld dragon lord, doesn't seem willing to leave. The Black Dragon Lord, the White Dragon Lord, and the Eastern Blue Dragon Lord were all looking at the dragon pearl in the center of the Dragon Palace. Above the dragon ball, a faint figure appeared. The tall figure was majestic and seemed to be resonating with the heavens. The Great Void Dragon Master. One of the few unparalleled powerhouses of the Eastern Sky Dragon Clan, one of the few level 17 Great Thousand World Realm powerhouses, the true ruler of the clan. You won't cry until you see the coffin, Tai-Bai Dragon Lord sneered. He didn't hide his disgust for the 9 Abyss Dragon Master at all. Qin Feng had killed one of his clones, causing his soul to be damaged. It had taken thousands of years for him to recover. If not for the fact that the Great Void Dragon Lord had suppressed him back then, he would definitely not have let the matter rest. The Profound Dragon Lord and the Eastern Blue Dragon Lord exchanged a glance and shook their heads. In the eyes of the 2 Dragon Lords, that 9 Nether Dragon Lord was indeed too stubborn this time. They had good intentions. Of course, it wasn't that he didn't have plans to accept the Spirit Sea Divine Branch, but it was for the sake of the 9 Underworld's Dragon Master's life. The Great Void Dragon Lord's expression did not change as he pondered. The Profound Dragon Lord couldn't help but ask, Great Void Dragon Lord, are we really not going to help the 9 Underworld's Dragon Master this time? The Profound Dragon Lord looked at the Great Void Dragon Lord. He was still unwilling to give up. In the eyes of the Profound Dragon Lord, the 9 Underworld's Dragon Master was truly an unparalleled talent. He had reached the pinnacle of innate Saint God in just a few thousand years. It would be a huge loss for the Eastern Sky Dragon Clan if such a genius died. On the side, the Eastern Blue Dragon Lord didn't speak. Compared to the Western Sky Dragon Clan, which was famous for its internal strife, the Eastern Sky Dragon Clan had more internal strife. In his eyes, the Great Void Dragon Lord and the faction behind him were probably more interested in the innate gods of the Spirit Sea. Without the innate gods of the Spirit Sea Divine Branch, existences like the Great Void Dragon Lord might not be willing to help the Spirit Sea Divine Branch fend off the Western Sky Dragon Clan. Alright, Purple Jade Emperor will decide whether to save the Spirit Sea or not. The Great Void Dragon Lord looked at the 3 Dragon Lords coldly. As you all know, our Dragon Lord's faction isn't stable in the Origin Divine World. The other rank 18 sovereigns aren't easy to deal with. Since the 9 Underworld's Dragon Master wants to consider, then let him think it over. It's best if he thinks it through. The faint figure glanced at the 3 Dragon Lords and disappeared from the Dragon Pearl in a flash. They're not from the same branch after all. They watched the Great Void Dragon Lord disappear. The Profound Dragon Lord and the Eastern Blue Dragon Lord looked at each other and sighed inwardly. Although they were all from the Eastern Sky Dragon Clan, there was still a difference in their origins. The Eastern Sky Dragon Clan didn't originate from any world. The Sky Dragon Clan had clansmen in various greater worlds, and lesser worlds. However, the strongest clan was the one born in the Origin Divine World. The dragon clan born in the 33 skies was stronger than the dragon clan born in ordinary world. Even Tai Xian, Tai Bai, and Dong Tsang, the 3 dragon lords of the heavenly dragon clan, were inferior in the eyes of the Origin God Realm's dragon clan experts. I hope Spirit Sea can survive this. The profound dragon lord and the eastern blue dragon lord sighed. They were all from the Spirit Sea, and it was their homeland. They didn't want Spirit Sea to be destroyed one day. In the Spirit Sea, the news of the Western Dragon Tribe's invasion spread through the Spirit Sea god system. The entire Spirit Sea was turbulent. The 8 tribes of Spirit Sea had obviously increased their training and alertness. Some of the gods in the pantheon had even started to purchase life-saving treasures and mystic arts at all costs. The billions of heavenly soldiers in the pantheon appeared in the Spirit Sea more frequently. They started to forcibly invade the various spirit zones and used thunderous methods to intimidate the major factions. The various changes were too much for the eyes to take in. Imperceptibly, the entire Spirit Sea became a little more desolate. The inescapable net became tighter. Some powerful beings seemed to have sensed that something was wrong. They restrained their forces and became more obedient. The entire Spirit Sea was like the calm before a storm. In the Lingxiao Palace, a figure sat on the throne in the center. Qin Feng was like a stabilizing needle. Behind him, there seemed to be an ancient tree that supported the heavens and the earth. He seemed to be sitting in the center of the ancient tree. His aura blended with the terrifying ancient tree and became one with the Spirit Sea. If it weren't for his true body sitting in the center of the Lingxiao Palace, the pantheon would have been in chaos. Above his head, the evolution of the 3 flowers of Tao had reached the final stage. Chapter 1551. Auspicious clouds the size of an acre appeared above his head. 3 flowers swayed in the wind, containing boundless Tao rhythms. This was the foundation of Qin Feng's immortal Tao and Buddhist Tao. Qin Feng specialized in martial Tao, shaman Tao, demon Tao, divine Tao, immortal Tao, and Buddhist Tao. He gathered the essence of each civilization into his body, almost forming a Tao of his own. If he were only a martial Tao expert, the 3 flowers of martial Tao would appear above his head, but they wouldn't give birth to auspicious clouds. Only pure martial Tao intent would nurture the connate great Tao. The 3 flowers swayed and connate Tao aura rose. They seemed to have absorbed the 2 complete connate great Taos of heaven and earth and nurtured them. The power of the 2 great Taos intertwined in his body. They were clearly separated, but they were as one. The first flower of Tao had 9 grades. It was like an immortal flower growing from the world tree. One could vaguely see the birth and death of the universe, the creation of mountains and rivers, and the prosperity of billions of beings. It contained a unique treasure that spun slowly, as if it were the great Tao of the multiverse itself. The second flower of Tao had no grade. A book was wrapped around the bud, and it bloomed with faint connate spirit light. It resonated with the rules of connate universe in the depths of the void, and countless invisible radiances seemed to fall from the rules of connate universe and merge into the depths of the bud. Wisps of perfect aura bloomed from the bud, growing denser with each passing day. Behind Qin Feng, the boundless shadow of the Chaos World Tree seemed to come alive. Under Qin Feng's command, it devoured the Spirit Sea's origin with all its might and watered the universe book in the bud like an old farmer. Finally, the last wisp of the universe book's aura was perfected after devouring a part of the Spirit Sea's origin. The moment this supreme treasure was completed, countless cultivators and beings in the multiverse who cultivated the laws of space felt the rules of connate universe in the void seemed to be cheering with joy. It grew several times thicker in the blink of an eye. Hum 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 hum. In the Lingxiao celestial court, a great wave of invisible light rushed out of the palace the moment this connate spirit treasure was completed. The light swept across the horizon and shook the void for billions of miles, forcing demons to flee. At the same time, an innate Tao aura was revealed, and an unparalleled brilliance swept across countless dimensions and planes. In the spirit sea, countless connate gods looked up at the source of the explosion, their eyes filled with greed as they stared at the firmament palace. More than half of the spirit sea could be seen clearly from that soaring treasure light. This treasure created such a phenomenon when it was born, and it was even accompanied by an innate spirit light. It was definitely a rare supreme-grade spirit item. 50 years ago, the Spirit Sea Divine System had been sweeping through all the major factions and suppressing the Spirit Sea. Many major factions had been completely suppressed. Although some connate spirit treasures had been born in recent years, most of them had fallen into the hands of the Spirit Sea Divine System. The many innate gods were furious, but they didn't dare to say anything. The treasure in front of him was different. It could be a spiritual treasure. Numinous treasures were born according to the laws of heaven and earth. Under every law, only one would be born. There were even some laws that did not have complete providence, causing the numinous treasures to be disrupted and degenerate into ordinary connate numinous treasures. For a moment, the eyes of countless great divines turned red. But looking in the direction of the Ling Shao celestial court, even the craziest great divines didn't dare to run over. A spiritual treasure, and a connate spiritual treasure at that. In the underworld, the earthly sovereign, Wang Daoi, suddenly emerged from seclusion and looked in the direction of the Ling Shao celestial court in horror, his eyes full of disbelief. How is this possible? In the depths of the origin, the Genesis primordial spirit's aura was close to perfection. Sensing the phenomenon above the Ling Shao celestial court, he suddenly opened his eyes. His gaze was like a sharp arrow that tore through the sky. There was a huge world phenomenon behind him. It was a huge world forged by countless spirit sea origins. The world was mobilized, and everything in the world, including the inescapable net, and billions of gods were all at his will. There was a very terrifying aura. Connate spiritual treasure. How can a connate spiritual treasure be born in this world in such a short time? The Genesis primordial spirit's face was livid and ferocious. No one knew better than the Genesis primordial spirit the significance of a connate spiritual treasure to an innate saint god who was about to merge again. There was still a trace of luck in his eyes. In the Ling Shao celestial court, Qin Feng waved his sleeve, and a silver-white treasure book that emitted a substantial connate spiritual light appeared in his palm. A wisp of innate spiritual light seemed to flow through his palm and into his Tao body, his nascent divinity, and even his entire true spirit. The Tao seed of the connate universe great Tao seemed to appear directly in front of him. At this moment, as if their hearts were connected, all the gods of the Spirit Sea Divine System appeared in the Ling Shao celestial court together. Their gazes revolved around the figure who had already stood up on the central throne. He seemed to be the same as Tao. Connate universe great Tao merge. His words were light as a feather, as if they were illusory, but billions of people could hear them clearly. In an instant, countless cultivators and living beings who cultivated the laws of space and the rules of space felt the connate universe great Tao in the void suddenly disappear. It was empty. All the cultivators and gods who comprehended the mysteries of space and cultivated the laws of space seemed to have suddenly lost their cultivation bases. At this moment, billions of gods in the Spirit Sea looked in the direction of the Ling Shao celestial court. After a dozen breaths, all the cultivators and gods who comprehended the mysteries of space and cultivated the laws of space and cultivated the laws of space finally sensed the traces of the connate universe great Tao. The boundless connate universe great Tao swept out, filling the depths of the souls of countless cultivators and gods who comprehended the mysteries of space and cultivated the laws of space and cultivated the laws of space. In an instant, countless cultivators' strength skyrocketed. At the same time, a ray of golden light spread across the endless void. A divine aura accompanied the golden light and swept across the endless void and the heavens. At this moment, billions of people in the spirit sea knelt in the direction of the Ling Shao celestial court. Even ordinary deity emperors, god emperors, ancestor gods, and quasi-world level experts of the greater thousand worlds knelt in the face of this divine aura. Countless heavenly sounds reverberated in the void. The purple aura between heaven and earth surged, and countless golden lotuses condensed from connate spiritual energy descended from the sky, merging into the bodies of some lucky gods in the spirit sea. A single golden lotus was equivalent to 100 years of diligent cultivation of divine power. Some of the plants and vegetation creatures that had no intentions of harnessing the golden lotuses also gained sentience and transformed into demon beasts. A breakthrough. In the origin, looking at the various phenomena in the origin, the Creator primordial spirit's face was full of grief and indignation. Since fate had allowed him to be reborn, why did he encounter such a terrifying existence? In the origin, a huge hand that blotted out the sky silently cut through time and space, grabbing it quietly. It ignored the roars, anger, and backlash of the origin of the spirit sea and turned the Creator primordial spirit's true body in an instant. Under the bombardment of the huge force, the Creator primordial spirit's body turned into ashes in an instant. Chapter 1552. In the Ling Shao Palace, one after another, silhouettes appeared on the divine concubines' thrones beside the central throne. Feng Yi, Queen of Silver Moon, Bai Yen Light Consort Shirhan, Shadow Consort Shirtong, Tai Su Consort Du Pingxia. Queen of Silver Moon gently caressed her abdomen, her beautiful eyes trembled. She could clearly sense that the dragon seed in her body was undergoing another miraculous change. The influence of this wave seemed to be like an extremely majestic radiance that entered her bloodline through the dragon child in her body. In an instant, the origin in her body increased greatly. Krong! A vast light burst out from her body like a bowl of silver moon that froze the heaven and earth. Under the amplification, Queen of Silver Moon's aura broke through the innate celestial monarch level and reached the peak of the innate celestial monarch level. Not only Queen of Silver Moon, but the other concubines were also affected by the Overgod's aura, more or less receiving a portion of the miraculous power. Their origin power increased greatly. Feng Yi and Light Consort also broke through the innate celestial monarch level. Shadow Consort Shirtong and Tai Su Consort Du Pingxiao were slightly behind, but they also had the shadow origin power in their bodies. Tai Su's origin power increased greatly as if it was nurtured in the Ling Hai. In an instant, they broke through from the ordinary innate deity king level to the innate deity emperor level. Among them, Bai Yen benefited the most. Outside of her body, an icy power that could freeze the world emerged, like a mysterious icy divine light that soared into the sky. Vaguely, it resonated with the innate extreme frost heaven and earth laws in the depths of the Ling Hai's origin power. Ancestral god level. Bai Yen-er's face was filled with mixed feelings of joy and confusion. Level 17 innate overgod, the king level of the great thousand worlds. Bai Yu was not an ignorant person. On the contrary, through Bai Emperor, she had come into contact with many celestial systems. Level 17 king level experts also had a place in the origin divine world. Such an existence was worthy of being called an ancient giant. Towards this man, her heart was filled with complicated feelings. He forcefully occupied her and even forbade her from seeing Ling of Gojoseon. From the bottom of her heart, she hated this man. He had broken the oath of eternal love between her and the Spirit King, the promise that they would grow old together. However, she had to admit that this sovereign was the most terrifying person she had ever seen. He could summon clouds with a flip of his hand and summon rain with a flip of his hand. His cultivation speed was so fast that it was unprecedented. For such a person, even if she hated this man deeply, she still felt a trace of pride in her heart. After all, he was her man. In the void there seemed to be a beam of light. In the invisible light, a figure slowly appeared. He was dressed in a black robe, with long hair draped over his shoulders. His robe had wide sleeves, and there seemed to be a power that could shake the chaos of the universe. However, he also seemed to be an ordinary person who had merged with the world. This state was extremely mysterious and indescribable. Qin Feng stood in the middle of the void. It was as if the time of the world had transformed into a torrent that washed over him. However, he couldn't be shaken in the slightest. He could summon millions upon millions of lives with his palm. An object was suspended in the surroundings, encompassing all directions. It was like the Taiji Yin and Yang, the 4 divisions, and the 8 trigrams. Drifting outside of it was the Tao. This is the power of the 17th level, the king level of the vast thousand worlds. Billions of worlds, countless chaotic spacetimes, millions of years of reincarnation, countless spacetimes, struggling in the mortal world. At this moment, the 17th level, the king level of the vast thousand worlds, the chaotic saint god, was finally achieved. In the past, Qin Feng's goal was only to return to the golden era to make up for his regrets and achieve an immortal true god body. After that, there were deity kings, deity emperors, ancestral gods, quasi-world level experts, and innate saint gods. With sparkling and translucent divine light in his eyes, Qin Feng's sleeves fluttered as an incomparably enormous power slid down from his sleeves. It seemed to be able to shatter the sky, shatter time and space, and destroy the universe. At this moment, his skills were immeasurable. He could split the heavens and earth, create the vast thousand worlds, refine the earth, water, wind, and fire. These were all things that could be done with a wave of his hand. There were also countless skills and mysteries. This level was extremely mysterious, and could no longer be described with words. Only after breaking through would one know how terrifying it was. With this power and the help of the origin of the spiritual sea wouldn't be afraid even if it faced an expert of the 18th level. Qin Feng's eyes flashed with a trace of fierceness. It was fine if the Western Dragon God system didn't come. But once they did, he would definitely teach them an unforgettable lesson. Qin Feng returned to the Lingxiao Palace. He needed time to regain control and refine the power after breaking through. In a flash, he appeared above the Lingxiao Palace. He looked around at the divine concubines who were refining and adapting to the skyrocketing origin. Qin Feng landed. The divine throne on the chaotic world tree seemed to have a spirit of its own. Crack, crack. Boundless wind and thunder seemed to have been broken. A huge branch of the world tree appeared above the Lingxiao Palace. Qin Feng looked up and looked over. The chaotic world tree forcefully shattered spacetime. Its branches seemed to have absorbed part of his light. Boom, boom, boom. One after another, many branches of the world tree appeared below the Lingxiao Palace. Countless branches covered the sky and covered half of the Lingxiao Palace where the Earth Swamp Divine Land was located. Countless spacetime fragments fell onto the ground, turning into earth, water, wind, and fire. The spiritual sea swallowed and absorbed them, turning them into mountains, lakes, ores, and volcanoes. Almost in an instant, almost half of the sovereign space had completely merged with the spiritual sea. Qin Feng raised an eyebrow. A trace of a smile appeared at the corner of his eyes. It wouldn't be long before the spiritual sea completely became his sovereign space. In a few steps, he appeared on the divine throne. He closed his eyes slightly. 3 flowers appeared above his head. The first lotus of Tao was at the 9th grade. It was complete. The second lotus of Tao was also gray, but it was also at the 8th grade. Wisps of Tao rules surrounded it. It was advancing to the 9th grade. Thanks to the Connate Spiritual Treasure Book of Universe, Qin Feng's foundation was stronger than expected. It wouldn't be long before Qin Feng perfected the connate laws of universe and entered the peak of the 17th level. However, entering the 18th level wasn't something that could be done in a short time. If the 17th level was the king of the greater thousand worlds, then the 18th level was a whole new level. It could be said to be beyond the greater thousand worlds level. It was the primeval beginning, heaven, earth, and earth. It was the most ancient saint god of the universe. The most heaven-defying thing about 18th level primordial experts wasn't just their earth-shattering strength, but their ability to artificially create 16th level saint god. Every 18th level primordial expert could condense 6 wisps of primordial violet chi in their lifetime. Using 6 wisps of primordial violet chi, they could artificially create 6 16th level saint gods. This was what Qin Feng valued the most. He had many divine concubines under him. Even if one cultivated to the ancestor god level and claimed to be immortal, they would eventually wither away with the world's decline and the changes in the laws of heaven and earth. However, it would be different if one could become a 16th level saint god. As long as one could become a 16th level saint god, even if the world withered away, they would be able to jump out of the upper realm and condense the laws of the myriad worlds. Chapter 1553. However, it was extremely difficult to break through to the 18th level. The 3 great Tao lotuses above Qin Feng's head represented 3 innate great Tao rules. To break through to the 17th level, he had to combine the opposite innate great Tao rules and refine the second great Tao lotus. To break through to the 18th level, he had to combine another innate great Tao rule. However, the last innate great Tao rule was very special. Moreover, the restrictions were very strange. It was to create one's own innate great Tao and not any of the innate great Taos in the universe. It was similar to the primordial chaos Taoist, who had created the innate primordial chaos Tao. However, I'm still too far away from the 18th level. Qin Feng's eyes flickered slightly. It was not easy to create one's own 18th level great Tao rule. Even the second lotus flower of the great Tao, which represented the innate universe law, was still far from enough. First, it needed the innate primordial chaos origin energy. Only the innate primordial chaos origin energy could condense the great Tao lotus that carried one's own innate great Tao. Condensing the third lotus into the innate primordial chaos lotus. This step alone was enough to stop most of the 17th order powerhouses. The innate primordial chaos origin energy was known as the mother of all chi and was extremely rare. Generally speaking, apart from the endless chaos and the occasional chaotic desolate domain, there was only one place where the innate primordial chaos origin energy could be born. The 33 heavens. The 33 heavens would definitely contain the innate primordial chaos origin energy. The chaos was boundlessly huge, and searching for the innate primordial chaos origin energy was like looking for a needle in a haystack. Even if some chaotic desolate domain was found, there might not be any innate primordial chaos origin energy. The 33 heavens were extremely rare. Although the 33 heavens' upper realms appeared one after another in this chaos sea, they were actually anomalies. Whether it was the Sky Demon Great World, Eastern Wilderness Great World, Emperor Shi Great World, Divine Martial Great World, or Spirit Sea Great World, they were all abnormal signs. Moreover, finding the 33 heavens was only a prerequisite. For example, in the Sky Demon Great World, there was no lack of innate primordial chaos origin energy. However, the innate saint gods had already divided the innate primordial chaos origin energy among themselves. Although some people found this world and absorbed a small amount of innate primordial chaos origin energy, it was like a drop in the ocean. However, for Qin Feng, the Eastern Wasteland, and even Emperor Shi, there was no need to worry about this. Occupying one of the upper realms of the 33 heavens, he had sufficient innate primordial origin energy to condense the primordial Tao Lotus. This was also the reason why Taoist creation, Time Dragon Lord, Chaos Evil God, and the others couldn't forget about the Spirit Sea. After condensing the primordial Chaos Tao Lotus, the strength of a stage 17 expert would undergo a huge change, as if he had been reborn. After that, it was the accumulation of providence. To break through to rank 18, Qin Feng might not be able to rely on the luck of a single Spirit Sea. Of course, if the Spirit Sea could grow to the level of the Origin Divine Realm, the Origin Astral Realm, the Supreme Immortal God Continent, or the Primeval Void Universe one day, it might be enough. At the very least, it would give birth to 4 out of 9 Khanate Daos. However, in order to nurture the 4-9 Khanate Dao laws, one needed not only to be strong beyond the Khanate stage, but also to have an extremely strong foundation. This was not something that could be accomplished overnight. In the Lingxiao Palace, Qin Feng was familiarizing himself with the power of the innate universe Great Tao Law. At the same time, he was trying to deduce a super-divine technique that corresponded to the innate universe Great Tao Law. This was not difficult for Qin Feng. At this moment, Qin Feng was in seclusion to familiarize himself with his new realm and power. The entire Spirit Sea God system was in an uproar. The appearance of a Stage 17, Primordial Chaos Saint God, had a huge impact. The appearance of a Stage 16, Primordial Chaos Saint God meant that an era would be under their rule. And the appearance of a Stage 17, Primordial Chaos Saint God in the Spirit Sea God system meant that from now on, the Spirit Sea God system would truly submit to the Spirit Sea God system. Even if more Stage 16, Primordial Chaos Saint Gods appeared in the Spirit Sea God system in the future, they would not be able to shake the Spirit Sea God system's power. Perhaps at this moment, there were still many factions in the Spirit Sea that were hostile to the Spirit Sea God system. But whether it was the old 72 mysterious sects or the 10 primordial paths that had hidden themselves in the myriad worlds, the 800 unorthodox groups, or the many ancient races and clans, they had no choice but to admit that they had completely lost their chance. The hearts of the people had turned against them. With Qin Feng's breakthrough, the various factions did not collapse in one fell swoop. But at this moment they had lost the will to contend with the Spirit Sea God system. There were even many factions that tried to make contact with the 8 divisions of the Spirit Sea God system. What an unprecedented talent! Countless experts have appeared in our Ling Sea. Many true gods have entered the chaos and many of them have become innate saint gods. There are even a few that have reached the 17th level. Sovereign Sui, Sovereign Shi, East Baron, Fortune Realm, and Ding Hai are all peerless talent. There are even Grand Mist Sovereigns like Primordial Chaos Daoist. But no one has ever achieved so much in just a few thousand years. Since the primordial chaos, the Spirit Sea has evolved for many eras. Countless primordial chaos saint gods, peerless geniuses, and countless experts have appeared. Finally, a supreme expert has been born. I never thought that I would be able to see a day like this, where the billions of gods in the Spirit Sea will truly be under one person. It's hard to imagine how far the Spirit Sea will go under the primordial chaos saint God's Spirit Sea God system's leadership. I can't wait to see what the next era will be like. I have a feeling that this will be an unimaginably brilliant era. Countless living beings looked up at the Lingxiao imperial court. Just that one person was enough to make the entire Spirit Sea realm pale in comparison. In the underworld, the earthly sovereign, Wang Daoi, wore a complicated expression. He had witnessed Qin Feng's growth with his own eyes. He had once predicted that one day, Qin Feng would be able to stand shoulder to shoulder with him. Qin Feng's breakthrough to Stage 16, Primordial Chaos Saint God, had already shocked him greatly. But who would have thought that in just a few thousand years, Qin Feng would make another breakthrough? Stage 17, Primordial Chaos. Saint God was a king-level expert in the myriad worlds and countless world. Such an existence was also an eternal overlord, an ancient overlord. At the same time, Wang Daoi also felt a sense of relief. After breaking through to stage 17, the spirit sea was as stable as Mount Tai. Even the Western Dragon God system would find it difficult to shake it. He looked at the Book of Life and Death in his hand. What he needed to do was no longer to worry about his family's future. Instead, he needed to focus on upgrading the postnatal Tao of reincarnation to the primordial Tao of life and death. Chapter 1554. In the Southern Sea, in the Heartless Palace, ancestor god Heartless was expressionless. But upon closer inspection, her eyes showed that she was caught off guard. On the surface of her body, thick innate extreme frost chi flowed. Strands of almost illusory innate extreme frost law manifested and merged with the innate extreme frost law. This was already the sign of a peak ancestor god. Vaguely, there was an even greater phenomenon. Thousands of trees were carved out of ice, billions of heavens were sealed in ice, frozen in the frost chi. However, there were still strands of cold chi leaking out, freezing thousands of miles of the sea, causing white snow to float up from the sea. This was a phenomenon caused by a huge increase in strength and the inability to perfectly gather one's godly power. Elder God Emotionless was indeed rather baffled. Not too long ago, when the prime god of the spirit sea divine system had attained his Tao, her quintessence had inexplicably increased greatly. Her innate extreme frost chi origin had increased by more than 3 times. Her innate extreme frost chi origin should be extremely strong, occupying a large portion of the Southern Sea's South Pole icebergs. As the ruler of the Southern Sea, she was also the innate extreme frost god emperor. She was the innate ice celestial emperor. The increase in her innate extreme frost chi origin had almost directly broken through to the innate celestial emperor level. To an expert like her, such an increase in talent was not only an increase in potential and foundation, but also an increase in fate. An innate celestial emperor of the ice celestial emperor innately commanded the ice celestial gods. An innate celestial emperor of the ice celestial emperor's range of command had expanded. A powerful innate saint god could form a rule divine domain. In the rule divine domain, the innate saint god was invincible. They were the makers of all kinds of rules, the only ones in control, and the ones who ruled over life and death. The ancestor gods were considered as quasi-great thousand-world-level experts. They could also create simple rule divine domains and use them to create innate Tao rules. As the ruler of the Southern Sea and Southern Sea, ancestor god Heartless innate extreme frost chi origin divine domain was constantly expanding. The entire Southern Sea was her rule divine domain. Endless icebergs rose and fell, one after another. Divine and majestic god spirits roamed within, using the rules to form all kinds of ice celestial spirits and ice celestial armies. During crucial moments, she could set up arrays of rules to refine strong enemies. This time, her strength had increased tremendously. Her entire god domain had almost solidified. She was only a little bit away from being able to integrate the innate frost law. However, the connate absolute frost law had yet to be born in the spirit sea. She had actually reached the pinnacle in one step. Although she didn't know why her strength and luck had suddenly soared, ancestor god Emotionless suppressed this bizarre increase. In any case, this matter was beneficial to her. Right at this moment, elder god Emotionless suddenly raised his head. The sun in the sky suddenly shone brightly. Screech! Accompanied by an excited and crisp phoenix cry, all the living beings in the spirit sea seemed to be able to see a sacred divine beast appear on the huge sun. She had the head of a chelan and the tail of a deer, the head of a snake and the tail of a fish, the back of a dragon and the back of a turtle, and the jaw of a swallow and the beak of a chicken. She was extremely beautiful, as if she had gathered the boundless flames and light between heaven and earth. It was a pure white that had never been seen before. In the next moment, the heavens shook, the three realms resonated, and the great path manifested. Countless cultivators of the great path, who cultivated the acquired light, felt their powers increase tremendously in an instant. There were even some light cultivators who were fighting with their enemies, whose strength suddenly increased by several levels, killing their opponents who were several levels above them. An earth-shattering pressure spread throughout the spirit sea. The heavenly music was faint, flowers fell from the sky, golden lotuses bloomed from the ground, and thousands of auspicious auras surged. Neon lights surged, fragrances filled the air, and beasts roared. Purple clouds came from the east for 30,000 miles. Countless auspicious phenomena filled the entire spirit sea. Strips of acquired great path that were related to light appeared on the vast and boundless land. In an instant, the countless living beings in the spirit sea, including plants, birds, and beasts, were all enlightened. Some even took on human form. Most of the light cultivators and living beings in the heavens benefited. Most of their divine power increased tremendously, and some of them directly advanced by a small realm, 2 small realms, or even a large realm. The billions of living beings in the spirit sea had seen similar phenomena and great path manifesting more than once. Naturally, they wouldn't be ignorant. Many living beings knew that another person had broken through the barrier and stepped into the greater thousand-world realm. From the day the Light Origin Holy Land was born, the gods had been waiting for this day. However, they didn't expect that the Light Origin Holy God that was born wasn't the most promising light ancestor god. The great Sun Golden Crow Demon Emperor, Divine Light Emperor Xiao Yuchan, was actually a phoenix, a light-mutated phoenix, the Khanate Phoenix Ancestor. The Khanate Phoenix Ancestor's breakthrough shook the entire spirit sea. The Phoenix race was the happiest. In the southern continent, when the Khanate Holy God's aura swept across the 100,000 volcanoes, many phoenixes that were born from the Khanate Yuan Qi knelt down and bowed. Congratulations, Queen Phoenix Ancestor! On the 10 volcanoes, millions of phoenixes could be seen reverting to their original forms. Under the lead of several giant phoenixes, they let out long cries and danced. It was a magnificent sight. Of course, not all forces were as happy as the phoenix race. In the savage desolate spirit domain, the Golden Crow race of the Kongsang Mountain was devastated. The Sun Star had always been the Golden Crow race's territory. Among the many great worlds, the Great Sun Golden Crow was the divine beast of the Great Sun. It was the symbol of light and the sun. The Phoenix race was at most the second strongest. They had always been suppressed by the Great Sun Golden Crow race. Today, he had occupied the Sun Star before the Golden Crows and became the sacred god of light origin. How could the Khanate Golden Crows not be furious? It wasn't just the Golden Crow race. In the entire savage desolate spirit domain, many monster race experts had ugly expressions, especially the dragon race of the 5 seas. After the primordial lord of the spirit sea became the 4th dragon lord of the spirit sea, the dragon race of the 5 seas had always considered themselves the direct descendants of the primordial lord of the spirit sea. They had always thought of themselves as superior. This was especially so for the dragon race. They occupied the providence of the 5 seas and were firmly at the top of the primordial races. Now that the Phoenix Ancestor had attained her Tao, the title of the number 1 race of the Spirit Sea, and even the providence would be temporarily given to the Phoenix race. In the East Sea Dragon Palace, several ancestral gods of the Water Palace looked at the Sun Star with gloomy expressions. The East Sea Dragon Emperor, the Azure Sea Dragon God, the Crimson Fire Dragon God, the Myriad Thunder Dragon God, and the Jellyfish Inji. The East Sea Dragon Emperor, Ao Qing, had an ugly expression. He had perfected the acquired Ewood Tao hundreds of years ago. He was hailed by the dragon race, and even the entire Spirit Sea, as the ancestral god with the highest chance of reaching the great thousand-world level. For this reason, the Spirit Sea Divine Branch's Water Palace's providence was given to him first. This time, the Phoenix race's connate Phoenix race had taken the lead. Since ancient times, all beasts had worshipped the heavens. Now that the Phoenix ancestor had taken the lead, it wasn't as simple as the Phoenix race stealing the dragon race's limelight. There was also a portion of the providence, scales, beasts, birds, and many other divine beast races' providence. Dragon Emperor, don't worry too much. So what if the Phoenix ancestor became the light origin holy god first? The crimson fire dragon god sneered. Let's not forget who the sky of the Spirit Sea is. Chapter 1555. Light Origin Saint God. In the underworld, on the earthly sovereign mountain, Wang Daoyi remained expressionless, only frowning. He noticed that after the innate Phoenix ancestor attained Tao, her aura was even stronger than his. The earthly sovereign side. The underworld origin saint ground was not inferior to the sun star, but the underworld was still incomplete and a part of its origin was still in the hands of the ancestral god of hell. Others might not know the relationship between the ancestral god of hell and the primeval overgod, but Wang Daoyi was clear about it. She was the future divine empress. Otherwise, he would have taken action long ago. Even if he couldn't kill the ancestral god of hell, he could have at least imprisoned and suppressed her. But with the Book of Life and Death in hand, he didn't particularly care about the underworld's origin. On the sun, after a while, innate Phoenix ancestors' massive great thousand-world level chi presences receded. She was no longer an ordinary ancestral god. Her quasi-great thousand-world level chi presences were all gone, replaced by a mighty power that was above the heavens. It was as mysterious as the law of light, and with just a thought, she could kill quasi-world level experts. At this moment, innate Phoenix ancestor understood why the experts below the greater world's level were ant. At this moment, several joyful phoenix cries came from the horizon. Fiery clouds rolled and several blazing suns broke through the sea of clouds. Several giant fiery red phoenixes landed in front of the sun star, and among them were a few mutated phoenixes. Crisp phoenix cries sounded and several beautiful figures descended from the void. Congratulations, Ancestor Phoenix Ancestor, for attaining Tao and becoming a saint god. If the true disciples of the Xingqian school were here, they would have recognized the phoenixes. Among them were the famous Ji family's two beauties of the Xingqian school, Ji Qingxian, Ji Huang'er. Some of the elders were also born in the Ji family. In fact, the ancient Ji family was a branch of the Phoenix bloodline. However, the Ji family was famous for their mutated Phoenix bloodline, and the most famous one was the Void Phoenix bloodline. When the Ji family's two sisters, Ji Qingxian and Ji Huang'er, went back and forth between heaven and earth, they also borrowed the power of heaven and earth and cultivated the innate divine body. Among the two sisters, Ji Qingxian cultivated the innate Azure Phoenix body and became the Phoenix ancestor of the Azure Phoenix bloodline. On the other hand, Ji Huang'er had condensed an innate Fire Phoenix body and became the progenitor of the Fire Phoenix bloodline. As for the Ancestor Phoenix ancestor, she was one of the ancient Phoenix ancestor. He was also one of the strongest primogenitors of the Ji family, a character on par with the primordial Great Emperor. Half a day later, the Phoenix ancestor personally led a dozen or so Phoenix progenitors into the Ling Shao celestial court. Soon after, news spread from the spiritual sea divine system. The Phoenix ancestor officially joined the spiritual sea divine system, becoming the second holy god of the spiritual sea divine system after the earthly sovereign. She was titled the Light Origin Holy God. Her fief was the 100,000 volcanoes and the sun star. The Phoenix clan would also send many innate Phoenix gods to join the fire division of the divine court. They would head to the various volcanoes to establish their fire manor and serve as fire god. At the center of the divine court, Qin Feng's eyes were clear and cold. Behind him, the branches of the chaotic world tree almost covered the entire Earth Marsh divine system. Oh wait. After Qin Feng reached the 17th level, the divine court upgraded to the divine court. The Earth Marsh divine system and its 9 other divine systems had been renamed the Central Heavenly Court divine system. The original 9 divine systems were called the Earth Marsh Continent, Water Marsh Continent, Wind Marsh Continent, Fire Marsh Continent, Tai Continent, Taisher Continent, Taichu Continent, Taisu Continent, and so on. Each divine system was divided into 9 continents. As Qin Feng cultivated and grew stronger, nearly 2/3 of the chaotic world tree's branches had already pierced into the spiritual sea. This meant that 2/3 of the primary god space and the spiritual sea had already fused. It wouldn't be long before the fusion was complete. At the same time, Qin Feng's strength would increase explosively. Of course, that would also be an opportunity for him to absorb the innate primordial chaos origin energy and refine his primordial chaos Tao Lotus. He looked at the light origin holy god who had left not long ago, then at the new headquarters of the Phoenix clan, the Sun Star. The submission of the Phoenix clan was within his expectations. However, these peaceful days were about to come to an end. Following the birth of the Light Origin Holy God, vital energy on the Light Origin Holy Land's side began to seethe. The Darkness Origin Holy Land was about to be born. Apart from that, the Western Dragon Tribe Divine System was about to arrive. Chapter 1556. 200 years passed in the blink of an eye. In the Ling Shao Palace, Qin Feng sat on the throne with his eyes closed. A huge world appeared around him, as if it encompassed the myriad worlds and contained the birth and death of the universe. There was a terrifying power in it that seemed to be able to refine the earth, water, wind, and fire and dominate time and space. This was the Chaos Saint God's 2 divine realms of laws. A rank 16, innate Saint God grasped an innate law and formed a divine realm of laws. In a divine realm, the Saint God was the creator of all kinds of laws, the only master of life and death. They could easily refine any god below the ancestral god realm to death. The innate Saint God's divine realm of laws was suppressed by the innate Saint God's divine realm of laws. With 2 divine realms of laws, the Chaos Saint God's power wasn't as simple as 1 + 1. Generally speaking, the more innate laws one grasped, the higher the grade of the Tao Lotus and the stronger the divine realm of laws. There were even some powerful innate saint gods that didn't cultivate any super-divine arts and only cultivated the rule divine realm. Thus, a single rule divine realm was more powerful than a million super-divine art. In 200 years, Qin Feng had only managed to fuse the 2 divine realms of laws together. He still couldn't fully merge them into one. The Chaos World Tree behind him, on the other hand, was close to 4/5 of the fusion. Qin Feng's 2 divine realms of laws were constantly interacting with the Chaos World Tree. It was thanks to the Chaos World Tree's fusion of the Spirit Sea's laws that his divine realm of laws was rapidly perfected. Rumble. It was at this moment that the void trembled violently as if something heavy had slammed into the Spirit Sea. After passing through the Spirit Sea's crystal walls, the shock wave was greatly weakened, making it difficult for the gods to detect. But when it fell into the ears of Qin Feng, earthly sovereign and ancestor Phoenix, the shock wave was no less than a thunderclap. Jumping up from his throne, Qin Feng looked at the void billions of miles away from the Spirit Sea. There, a terrifying power seemed to be rushing toward the Spirit Sea. At the same time, in the over-god space, a jade-green light rushed in from the void billions of miles away. A message from the Life Saint God? Qin Feng's face sank. He reached out his hand, and the emerald light fell into Qin Feng's hand like a meteor. Your Highness Qin Feng, the Western Dragon God System, has shaken off the Master of Grand Mist's obstruction and is heading towards the Spirit Sea. You have to be careful. A slightly heavy and hurried voice came from the green light. Bang! At this moment, the voice came to an abrupt halt as a profound energy abruptly appeared and cut off the sacred god of life's message. Submit or else die. A cold voice sounded. Qin Feng furrowed his brows. He could clearly sense the immense power of that force. It was far beyond the 17th level. This was a powerhouse who had surpassed the 17th step. Even though there was an endless void between them, just a trace of power was enough to shake one to the core. Qin Feng's heart sank. An 8th Order Grand Mist Holy God could already touch the Chaos Grand Tao within the endless chaos. His strength was truly terrifying. However, when he sensed the other party's confident tone, he sneered in his heart. Boom! A tremendous force clenched his fist, and it seemed as if the world's laws were completely crushed by his palm. Bang! That trace of power was shattered into nothingness. In a flicker, Qin Feng's figure appeared outside the Spirit Sea. The moment Qin Feng appeared, two figures silently appeared beside him. Earthly Sovereign, Phoenix Ancestor. The three of them looked over. At this moment, hundreds of enormous and terrifying fleets appeared in the chaos billions of miles away from the Spirit Sea. They were rapidly approaching the chaos where the Spirit Sea was located. In front of that terrifying fleet, the three of them were like floating canoes in the middle of an ocean fleet. The Western Dragon God System's fleet. With just a glance, the Earthly Sovereign and Phoenix Ancestors' faces sank, and a chill ran down their spines. Even though they had broken through to the 16th step and grasped a portion of the Grand Tao's laws, they still felt a deep sense of death under that enormous fleet's aura. They couldn't resist at all. Your Majesty! The two of them looked at Qin Feng, whose expression didn't change. Dressed in a black robe, Qin Feng stood with his hands behind his back. His pitch-black hair draped over his shoulders, and there was a rare murderous intent between his eyebrows. You two retreat and stabilize the Spirit Sea. Don't let me have any worries. The Earthly Sovereign and Phoenix Ancestor looked at each other and took a deep breath. Your Majesty, don't worry. We guarantee with our lives that we won't let some people take advantage of this opportunity to cause trouble. The two holy gods' faces were steely. Forget it. The two of them turned into a stream of light and returned to the Spirit Sea. Qin Feng glanced at it calmly, and many sparkling and translucent swords seemed to be growing out of his palm. He looked at the Western Dragon Divine Branch. Did the Western Dragon God System really think the Spirit Sea was a pushover? What is he going to do? At this time, spies from many god systems were already scattered around the chaos. Over the past 200 years, the news that the Chaos Divine System had taken action to stop the Western Dragon God System had spread throughout the chaos. Many god systems had already gathered outside the Spirit Sea. Apart from watching the show, there were also god systems that wanted to fish in troubled waters, or to take advantage of the conflict between the sandpiper and the clam. A mantis trying to stop a chariot. In the Grey Chaos, several holy gods of the Dragon God System had already arrived. The leader was the Great Void Dragon Master, followed by the East Blue Dragon Master, the Black Dragon Master, and the White Dragon Master. The arrival of the four Dragon Masters caused a vast amount of dragon chi to surge. The Khanate laws affected the god laws of the myriad worlds, forming a divine kingdom of dragons. Countless amounts of chaos energy were assimilated by the dragon chi of the Dragon Masters. However, the one who spoke was indeed a holy god of the Golden Crow clan. The three holy gods of the Golden Crow clan, Nanming Holy God, Fire Cloud Holy God, and Fire Spirit Holy God, had already arrived. In front of them was a second step, 17th rank Chaos Holy God. That was the Golden Crow clan's expert in the origin divine world, Nirvana Holy Lord. The Golden Crow clan's experts did not hide their anger and killing intent toward the Spirit Sea. In the past, the two holy gods, Fire Cloud Holy God and Nanming Holy God, had their clones destroyed one after another in the Spirit Sea. The entire Golden Crow clan in the Spirit Sea had become the Spirit Sea divine system's subordinates and servants. Although they were only low-level clansmen, it was still a great humiliation to the Golden Crow clan's experts. It might not be a mantis trying to stop a chariot. Haven't you noticed the cultivation level of the other party? A faint, pleasant female voice sounded from the chaos around the two clans. Many cultivators looked over and saw several figures wrapped in a stream of light. Experts from the Phoenix clan and the Great Golden-Winged Rock clan. Nirvana Holy Lord's expression changed slightly. Crimson Phoenix Master. She recognized the graceful Holy God in the lead. She looked as if she had walked out of boundless destructive flames. Behind her were 5 other 16th-rank Holy Gods. They were experts from the Phoenix clan and the Great Golden-Winged Rock clan. Chapter 1557. The Phoenix clan had always had a close relationship with the Golden-Winged Great Rock. It was almost like he was wearing a pair of pants. On the other hand, the Golden Crow clan and the Phoenix clan had always been at odds with each other. Both clans were born from fire and were innate divine beasts born from fire. They possessed all kinds of powerful innate spirit fires. This was an unavoidable battle of the Great Tao. The Scarlet Phoenix Master was an almighty of the origin divine realm's Phoenix clan. Nirvana Sacred Lord recognized this old enemy. Back then, the two of them had fought to the death many times over the innate Nirvana laws. Nirvana Holy Lord was named Nirvana because of the innate Nirvana law. On the other side, the experts of the various clans had arrived. The Wood Spirit clan, the Heavenly Snake clan, the Kuan Pung clan, and other primal chaos clans sent their experts over. Aside from the powerhouses from the celestial demon Great World, there were also powerhouses from Emperor Shi's divine branch, the Shenwu continent and the Eastern Wasteland. Sure enough, he has broken through the 17th level. The younger generation will surpass us in time. Under the lead of the Eastern Wilderness Overgod, the 5 holy gods of the Eastern Wilderness also appeared outside the Spirit Sea. The sacred god of annihilation, the sacred god of life, the sacred god of Earth Mother, the goddess of misfortune, and the goddess of fortune. The 5 sacred gods stared at the black-robed figure outside the Spirit Sea with complicated emotions. What a genius! Within Emperor Shi's god system, Master God Emperor Shi led several holy gods and appeared near the Eastern Baron god system. He had a very high opinion of Qin Feng. His appearance seemed to have split the chaos apart. The faint sound of a zither could be heard as he refined earth, water, wind, and fire to form the innate Tai Chi, Yin and Yang to the 4 divisions, and the 4 divisions to the 8 trigrams. However, his voice was filled with coldness. Innate laws of Yin and Yang, innate laws of sound. Many of the Master God's expressions changed slightly. The innate law of sound was a rather powerful law. There were very few powerhouses who could master the innate law of sound. Generally speaking, there were not many in the upper realm who could give birth to the innate law of sound. Geniuses are geniuses, but since ancient times, geniuses don't live for long. There aren't many geniuses among us who can reach this step. One of the sovereigns said calmly. It was Nirvana Sacred Lord. That might not be the case. A slightly cold and dignified voice sounded. Suddenly, a small patch of chaos rolled in the chaotic void. An invisible, tremendous will descended into the void. Under the lead of the leading figure, 4 figures silently appeared in the chaotic void. They were like the monarchs of the primal chaos. Boundless primal chaos rolled, boiled, and roared. It was extremely terrifying. experts from the chaotic royal family. Seeing these figures, even the powerful second-step existences like the Eastern Wilderness Overgod, Emperor Shi, Nirvana Holy Master, and the Crimson Emperor's Overgod were shocked, and their expressions changed slightly. Many Divine Branches factions even quickly gave up a part of their territories. They didn't dare to get in his way. They're from the Chaos Royal Clan, one of the top 10 clans of Chaos. Behind the Eastern Wilderness Overlord, the Sacred God of Life, the Sacred God of Annihilation, the Sacred God of Earth Mother, the Goddess of Fortune, and the Goddess of Misfortune silently exchanged glances. The 5 of them could see the fear in each other's eyes. The primal Chaos Royal race had always been mysterious. This race was extremely powerful and could be said to be one of the top 10 strongest races in the primal Chaos Sea. However, most of the Chaos Royal family's forces were in the center of the Chaos Sea. The Origin Divine World was just outside the primal Chaos Sea. It was considered a relatively remote corner. For some reason, this place had attracted experts from the Chaos Royal race. Nirvana Holy Master's expression only changed slightly before he regained his composure. The Golden Crow race was also one of the 100 clans of the primal Chaos Sea. Moreover, they were ranked relatively high. Although the Chaos Royal race was powerful, it wasn't to the extent where they had to retreat. However, you're right about one thing. He's definitely going to die today. The leading expert from the Chaos Royal race was unusually domineering. Many Divine Branches experts' expressions changed slightly. Judging from the tone of this expert from the Chaos Royal race, he seemed to be hostile toward Ling Hai. When did Ling Hai offend this expert from the Chaos Royal race? In the Eastern Wilderness Divine Branch, the Eastern Wilderness Holy God's eyes flashed with a strange light. The Chaos Royal race had always been active in the central region of the Primal Chaos Sea. The central region of the Primal Chaos Sea was the place where the essence of the Primal Chaos Sea gathered. Compared to the central region of the Primal Chaos Sea, this place wasn't barren, but it was still a remote wilderness. The Chaos Royal race has appeared here. What other secrets do they have? The Eastern Wilderness Overgod's expression didn't change. However, based on the changes in the Primal Chaos Sea, he had some guesses. Beside Ling Hai, in the Primal Chaos, Qin Feng frowned as he looked around. His divine power was extremely strong. Naturally, he noticed that there were all kinds of hidden gazes looking at him. A pack of wolves waiting to ambush him. The arrival of the Chaos Royal race didn't conceal anything. They appeared openly. Qin Feng's divine eyes naturally saw them very clearly. Under the 4 or 5 rays of light, the aura of the primal chaos circled around the 5 experts. They seemed to be favored by the primal chaos law. They were somewhat similar to the chaos evil gods, but there were some differences. It's the Chaos Royal race of the 10 great races. After refining part of Evil Lord Lawlessness's imprint, Qin Feng obtained part of his remnant soul memories. In Evil Lord Lawlessness's memories, although the Chaos Evil Gods had the word chaos, they weren't born in the primal chaos. However, the Chaos Royal race was different. The Chaos Royal race referred to living beings born in the primal chaos before the heavens and earth were created. They could be primal chaos ferocious beasts, primal chaos divine spirits, primal chaos embryos, etc. The Chaos Royal race was extremely powerful, especially in terms of physical strength. The most famous Chaos Royal race was the Pangu clan. Strictly speaking, the Genesis primordial spirit Pangu was a peerless genius of the Chaos Royal race. According to Evil Lord Lawlessness's memories, the Chaos Royal race's territory isn't in this area. Could it be that these experts of the Chaos Royal race are here to seek revenge? The Chaos Royal race expert looked over with a hint of hostility in his eyes. Qin Feng thought to himself, "Rumble." The Western Dragon Divine Branches fleet finally appeared at the front of the Spirit Sea, along with waves of pressure that swept the area. On a huge Chaos battleship in the middle, several terrifying experts' gazes fell on the spirit sea. Taoist Creation's face was ashen. Looking at Qin Feng, his eyes were filled with disbelief and anger. He found that Qin Feng had broken through to the 17th level of the Greater Thousand World King realm. At this time, the strength of his pressure was even stronger than his. How is this possible? How can he be at the 17th level? He gritted his teeth so hard that they almost broke. He clenched his fists, and his divine power fluctuated violently. Even a fool could feel the shock, anger, jealousy, and uneasiness in his heart. Taoist Creation, you don't have to be like this. The primeval sovereign should be worried. In fact, you should be happy. A Western Dragon Divine System expert glanced at Taoist Creation and said indifferently, "A great enemy with unlimited potential is going to die in front of you today." Chapter 1558. The Wind Disaster Lord, Fire Disaster Lord, Pain Saint God, Hatred Saint God, Howling Saint God, Earthcrack Saint God, and several other dragon race experts sneered. This time, most of the Western Dragon race's forces under the Doomsday Lord had mobilized. The Wind Disaster Lord's voice fell, and he glanced at Taoist Creation and the Doomsday Lord. His expression changed, and he took a step forward to the front of the ship and shouted coldly, "Primeval Saint God, the Western Dragon race will give you one last option. Offer up a trace of your true spirit and everything in the Ling Sea, and submit to the Western Dragon race. Don't make a mistake." Qin Feng also recovered from his shock. He looked at the huge battleship and the Western Dragon race's high and mighty figures on the battleship. Qin Feng's gaze fell on the Doomsday Lord. He felt a terrifying pressure from the Doomsday Lord. After a moment of silence, Qin Feng raised his head and said sincerely, "Doomsday Lord, you should be clear that now that I have broken through and fully control one of the 33 upper worlds, even if you are the third-step Grand Miss Lord, I'm afraid you can't do anything to me. The Ling Sea only has a life and death grudge with Taoist Creation. It doesn't have much enmity with the Western Dragon race. Why don't we both take a step back?" On the bow of the warship, the Apocalypse Sovereign raised his head and coldly stared at the Spirit Sea, at Qin Feng. "Primeval Saint God, let's not talk about you killing the Time Dragon Lord. Do you really think you can escape from me just because you broke through to the 17th level?" His expression was calm as he stared at Qin Feng. It was like he was looking at an ant that was trying to struggle. Does he really think he is the Eastern Wilderness over God? Seeing this scene, many dragon race experts sneered inwardly. When the Eastern Wilderness over God had just broken through to the 17th level, a peerless 18th level expert had appeared in the Chaos Sea and tried to kill him. But relying on the Eastern Wilderness upper world, the Eastern Wilderness over God had withstood the attacks of that peerless 18th level expert. But that was only an exception. Although there were very few experts who could monopolize one of the 33 upper worlds in the Chaos Sea, there were still some. What kind of existence were 18th level experts? They were existences who had gradually come into contact with the laws of chaos. They weren't existences that a 17th level expert could resist. In the past, the Eastern Wilderness over God had been blessed with too much luck. It seems like this battle is as inevitable. Qin Feng took a deep breath. If it wasn't necessary, he really didn't want to love the Western Dragon race to death. But today, he had to give his all. It was clear that the Western Dragon tribe didn't just want to avenge the Time Dragon Lord. They also had their eyes on the delicious Spirit Sea. Let's of Heaven God of War. Since the Apocalypse Lord wanted his Spirit Sea Dragon God system, he could not be blamed for being merciless. Of Li Ling, Dragon Lord, Dragon Lord, and Lord, he Lord. Bang of. It was as if thousands of cannons were firing at the same time. Hundreds of beams of terrifying divine light roared out from the hundreds of huge chaos battleships. Qin Feng's expression changed slightly. Under the bombardment of such terrifying battleships, even a 17th-level expert would be smashed to smithereens. His figure instantly entered the Spirit Sea. Rumble! Hundreds of beams of light hit the Spirit Sea. Tens of millions of crystal walls around the Spirit Sea were instantly destroyed. Many god systems looked at this scene in a daze. Especially those small god systems that didn't have the 33 upper worlds as their foundation, they felt their scalps go numb. If they didn't have the 33 upper worlds as their foundation, the overgod space would have been instantly turned into ashes by these hundreds of battleships. Following the first round of bombardment, the second round of bombardment was launched. There was almost no pause. After dozens of rounds of bombardment, tens of millions of crystal walls were destroyed. After dozens of rounds of bombardment, hundreds of millions of crystal walls were evaporated. What a powerful bombardment! In the depths of the Spirit Sea, Qin Feng's gaze fell on the periphery of the Spirit Sea. Following the birth of the seventh innate law, the Spirit Sea's outer crystal walls had about 600 million layers. This round of bombardment had evaporated 1/6 of them. Even the law of primal chaos had been obliterated. However, this level of bombardment was still insufficient to break through the Spirit Sea. Rumble! The outer crystal walls of the Spirit Sea seemed to be alive. They were like huge whales swallowing and spitting out seawater. The Spirit Sea swallowed the dense chaotic energy within the Chaos Sea. With the endless chaotic energy replenishing the Spirit Sea, the evaporated crystal walls rapidly recovered. Although the speed of evaporation wasn't as fast, it was almost impossible to break through the outer crystal walls of the Spirit Sea. Didn't they just ascend to the upper worlds? How could they resist the bombardment of hundreds of chaos battleships of our Western Dragon God system? The expressions of the Lord of Wind Disaster, the Lord of Fire, the Holy God of Pain, the Holy God of Hatred, the Lord of Wailing, the Holy God of Earth Fisher, and several other Dragon God experts had already turned gloomy. They glared at Taoist creation, their eyes filled with anger and murderous intent after being deceived. A newly ascended upper world would, at most, have 2 or 3 innate laws. The crystal walls derived from them would at most have about 300 million layers. If that was the case, the Spirit Sea would be completely destroyed after 100 bombardments. However, after nearly 200 bombardments, the Spirit Sea seemed to be completely fine. It was like a fortress that wouldn't fall under the bombardment of billions of cannons. How is this possible? Taoist creation's face was ashen. He stared at the layers of crystal walls of the Spirit Sea, as if he didn't see the ferocious looks in the eyes of the Dragon God experts. His eyes were filled with disbelief. Before he left, the Spirit Sea only had 3 innate laws. It's already in an invincible position. Seeing this, the Eastern Wilderness Overgod, Emperor Shi, Red Phoenix Overgod, Nirvana Sacred Overgod, the Chaos Royal Clan, and many other god systems of various sizes changed their expressions. Clearly, it wasn't just the Western Dragon God system. All the other god systems had underestimated the Spirit Sea. Just now, under the intense bombardment, not to mention 300 million crystal walls, even 400 million crystal walls would be on the verge of collapse. The Spirit Sea was as stable as Mount Tai. Clearly, it didn't just have 4 innate laws. It had at least 5 innate laws. Taoist creation, is this the newly ascended upper world you were so confident about? The Wind Disaster Dragon Overlord glared at Taoist creation. On the side, the Fire Dragon Overlord, the Pain Dragon Overlord, the Hatred Dragon Overlord, the Wailing Dragon Overlord, the Fisher Dragon Overlord, and several other dragon race experts looked at Taoist creation with extremely gloomy eyes. The Western dragon race had great expectations for this expedition. They'd even paid a hefty price for it. In the end, they'd bitten off a hard bone that they couldn't chew. Taoist creation's face was ashen, but he couldn't explain. In the Spirit Sea, after hundreds of rounds of bombardment, the hundreds of Chaos battleships began to cool down. Qin Feng calmly walked out from behind the broken crystal walls. He wasn't someone who would just take a beating and not fight back. Chapter 1559. The hundreds of Western Dragon Clan's fleets fired a round of volley. Although the hundreds of Chaos battleships were condensed by the Western Dragon Clan's top-notch refining methods, such a continuous bombardment of such intensity also required a period of cooldown. When the hundreds of Chaos battleships' cannons cooled down, it was time for Qin Feng to counterattack. Qin Feng silently moved and appeared in the center of the hundreds of Chaos battleships. Domain, primeval divine domain. His figure suddenly appeared, and in an instant, a huge divine domain silently spread out. Endless spatial rules expanded, and a destructive rule materialized within it, covering nearly a third of the hundreds of ships in the Chaos fleet. Among the nearly 400 Chaos battleships, more than 100 of them instantly gathered in the divine domain. How dare you! Qin Feng's movements were extremely fast. His figure flashed across time and space. The Lord of Wind Disaster, the Lord of Fire, the Holy God of Pain, the Holy God of Hatred, the Holy God of Wailing, the Holy God of Earth Fisher, and several other experts of the dragon race were unable to sense him. However, the Apocalypse Overlord, who was at the third step of the Apocalypse Overlord, sensed him immediately. The Apocalypse Overlord laughed in anger, and with a wave of his sleeve, a black meteor streaked across space and appeared above Qin Feng's head in an instant. At the same time, an extremely powerful divine domain of laws pressed down on Qin Feng. The Apocalypse Overlord's aura of destruction, withering, and death intertwined with three powerful innate laws, enveloping the hundreds of Chaos battleships and firmly suppressing Qin Feng's dual divine domain of laws. A triple divine domain of laws of the third step of the Holy God. Qin Feng's face darkened. The innate law of life and death, the innate law of doom, and a completely unfamiliar innate law that could cause all things to wither and destroy. The three intertwined laws seemed to want to completely refine Qin Feng to death. Qin Feng frowned. At this moment, he realized that within the Apocalypse Overlord's triple divine domain of laws, he could not move at all. The primeval law divine domain, that was formed from the innate law of creation and innate law of universe, was almost completely suppressed. Whether it was the use of innate laws or pure divine power, he was far inferior to the Apocalypse Overlord. When he saw the black meteor again, he had a terrifying feeling that his soul was about to be annihilated. Dharmakaya, wheel of the heavenly path of the spiritual sea, the power of the origin of the spiritual sea. With a soft bellow, Qin Feng's eyes flickered with a hint of ferocity, and a terrifying power of laws suddenly emerged from behind him. A huge light wheel appeared behind him, and in the light wheel, there was a huge world with 7 huge innate laws floating around it. This was the ability of Qin Feng's Dharmakaya. Through the wheel of the heavenly path of the Spirit Sea, he could summon the original power of the Spirit Sea anytime and anywhere. This was an extremely heaven-defying ability. The summoned Spirit Sea Phantom fused with the primeval law divine domain, and the primeval law divine domain expanded rapidly. Bang bang! The violent power directly shattered the huge black meteor. Rumble! The vast primeval law divine domain transformed like a terrifying divine sword, slashing through the void with peerless sharpness. With a ripping sound, the Apocalypse Lord's expression changed drastically, and his 3 divine domains of laws suddenly shattered into pieces. Qin Feng's gaze was not directed at the Apocalypse Lord. Qin Feng was well aware of how powerful a third-step sacred god was. Even if he borrowed the power of the Spirit Sea's law to descend, it was impossible to shake an existence like the Apocalypse Lord. But today, He could make the Western Dragon Divine System bleed. His starry eyes were cold, and his brows were frosty. He grabbed the huge sword transformed from the primeval law divine domain and swept it toward the hundreds of chaos battleships. The sword light traversed the endless chaos. Bang bang! Nearly 200 huge chaos battleships were split into two. Many experts of the Western Dragon Divine System in the chaos battleships did not even have time to wail before they were turned into ashes in the blink of an eye. "Little bastard, how dare you!" The Apocalypse Lord was furious. Looking at the hundreds of chaos battleships that had turned into ashes, his heart was bleeding. The chaos battleship was extremely difficult to refine. Regardless of whether it was the materials, the refinement, or the captain of the battleship, even with the wealth of the Western Dragon tribe, it would take dozens of eras to refine one chaos battleship. The captain of each chaos battleship was carefully selected and handed over to the most elite of the Western Dragon Divine System. Qin Feng had destroyed more than 100 chaos generals with just one strike. That was the foundation of the Western Dragon Divine System that took thousands of eras to refine. My heart hurts. This is just the beginning. Qin Feng had a ferocious expression as he once again swung the huge sword transformed from his divine domain toward the remaining 200 chaos battleships. Activate the Chaos Protective Shield and form the Chaos Coiling Dragon Array. The Wind Disaster Lord, Fire Disaster Lord, Pain Saint God, Hatred Saint God, Howling Lord, Earth Fisher Saint God, and several other Dragon Divine System experts reacted and roared. With the 6 Sacred God battleships in the lead, the Chaos battleships lit up with extremely bright protective shields almost simultaneously. At the same time, the Chaos battleship's formation began to change. Vaguely, they formed an incomparably huge, complicated, and enormous formation. "Brat, how dare you be so arrogant?" The Apocalypse Lord's icy voice sounded. A moment of carelessness and Qin Feng's sudden sneak attack had destroyed more than 100 Chaos battleships. The Apocalypse Lord was enraged. The torn Apocalypse Law Divine Domain in his hand transformed into a destructive pitch-black ancient spear that suddenly pierced toward Qin Feng. Everywhere it passed, it was as if the chaos was completely torn apart. "It's the Apocalypse Spear." Seeing this ancient spear, the faces of the many pantheons' core gods changed drastically. It was rumored that many innate saint gods had died in the hands of the Apocalypse Spear of the Western Dragon Divine System's Apocalypse Lord. This was a fearsome divine weapon that could make the heavens pale in comparison. Just in time. Qin Feng seemed to have predicted this long ago. His expression did not change. The giant sword shadow that was tens of thousands of feet long suddenly changed directions and blasted toward the doomsday ancient spear. Seeing this, the gods shook their heads inwardly. The Apocalypse Spear was not that easy to receive. At the end of the day, Qin Feng was still a level 17 sacred god of the second step. Although he had the support of the origin power of the Spirit Sea, such a direct clash would place a huge burden on Qin Feng, and might even result in a backlash. Rumble! Unexpectedly, when the ancient doomsday spear struck the ancient sword, a strange change occurred. It directly entered the depths of the ancient sword. It was as if the ancient sword was a Milky Way of stars. "It's the power of the connate universe law." Some pantheon's experts saw through the mystery. But it's useless. Although the connate universe law is marvelous, the primeval Lord God is only rank 17. His grasp of the connate universe law is far inferior to the Apocalypse Lord's. A powerful second step Lord God shook his head. If he's not careful, the Apocalypse Spear's power will tear through his connate universe law and pierce through his divine body, killing him in one blow. Chapter 1560. Of course, Qin Feng was well aware of the gap between him and the Apocalypse Lord. Whether it was the use of innate laws or the degree of control of power, they were incomparable. Thus, he played to his strengths and played to his strengths. What was Qin Feng's strong point? His strong point was the origin divine power that he had temporarily borrowed. However, after the first attack, his divine origin power was rapidly consumed. At the same time, his rank 17 Chaos Dao physique was somewhat unable to bear the terrifying impact of divine power. A strange glint flashed in Qin Feng's eyes. His divine power surged and blasted into the divine domain transformed greatsword. A strange fluctuation flickered. It swung the greatsword in an arc and continued to slash at the remaining chaos battleships. Spatial transfer. A pitch-black stream of light blasted out from the greatsword and hit the chaos battleship that had raised the coiling dragon formation. Not good. The Apocalypse Lord's expression changed drastically. He instantly reacted, but it was too late. Rumble. The Doomsday Spear instantly exploded. Under the withering aura, the coiling dragon formation's protective barrier shook violently. In almost an instant, countless gods in the Chaos battleship died from the Doomsday Spear's counterattack. The coiling dragon formation's protective barrier was extremely astonishing. The Doomsday Spear's attack only dimmed it a little. Immediately after, Qin Feng's divine domain greatsword slashed through the air. This attack contained the divine origin power of the Spirit Sea. This attack completely surpassed that of an ordinary third-step holy god. Bang! The blazing divine light easily shattered the coiling dragon formation's protective barrier. The remaining 200 or so battleships were completely exposed to the greatsword. Rumble! Nearly 200 chaos battleships were blasted into pieces. When the greatsword touched the ground, many Western dragon gods were blasted into ashes. Rumble! In the endless chaos, countless mists of blood roiled. The phenomenon of a holy god's death erupted. The Wailing Lord and the holy god of Earth Fisher, two Western dragon race experts, did not even make a sound under the greatsword's attack. They were sliced into bloody fragments, their true spirits destroyed. The holy god of pain and the holy god of hatred were also sent flying. Their true bodies cracked and were on the verge of collapse. The Lord of Wind, Lord of Fire, and Taoist Creation, the three 17th Order powerhouses, had their divine kingdoms shattered and suffered heavy injuries. Primeval Lord. The Apocalypse Lord flew into a rage, and in his fury, the primal chaos in all directions shattered. A gigantic palm ruthlessly slammed toward Qin Feng. It was as if he wanted to smash him into a meat patty. Qin Feng's eyes were cold. His attack had succeeded, and he could feel the divine origin power in his body weakening. His figure flashed, and like a stream of flowing light, he disappeared from the spot in an instant. You still want to run? The Doomsday Lord sensed that Qin Feng's godly power was weakening. His eyes were extremely malevolent as a pearl appeared in his hand. It was a sparkling and translucent pearl. As soon as it appeared, the primal chaos in all directions was sealed. The chaos bead. It was a chaos origin embryo that was born from the primal chaos. He had refined it into a strange treasure that contained primal chaos. It could open up a boundless world, but it also had the ability to seal the primal chaos. Not to mention a 17th Order powerhouse. Even a 17th Order powerhouse would need 1 or 2 seconds to break through the seal of the chaos bead. 1 or 2 seconds was enough to turn that bastard in front of him into ashes. In the primal chaos, Qin Feng's figure rapidly flew toward the Spirit Sea. He felt a deathly terror shrouding his heart in an instant. Open for me. Qin Feng's face was stern. The last bit of divine origin power in his Spirit Sea burned like a ray of light. Bang! The Apocalypse Lord felt the chaos bead in his hand vibrate violently. A ray of light like a rainbow pierced through the chaos bead's suppression. In the blink of an eye, he arrived at the periphery of the Spirit Sea. Qin Feng's eyes flickered with a trace of a smile. At this moment, a cold, indifferent smile was heard. "Your Excellency, please wait. This path is blocked." As soon as the voice fell, 4 to 5 figures silently appeared in front of the Spirit Sea. 5 gigantic primal chaos divine domains intertwined like a giant net, blocking Qin Feng's path. They were experts from the chaotic noble clan. The leading gray-robed expert looked at Qin Feng indifferently, with a trace of mockery in his smile. "I wonder how much power you have left? Your Excellency, you'd better die here obediently." Rumble. At the same time, the gigantic primal chaos divine domains intertwined and turned into a huge wave of primal chaos that charged toward Qin Feng. Qin Feng's face instantly darkened. The experts from the chaotic noble clan had appeared at the right time. They were right. He had borrowed less than 10% of his divine origin power. He was unable to break through the obstruction of the chaotic noble clan. Behind him, the gigantic palm was following closely. The crisis of life and death was imminent. Scram! Qin Feng's eyes flickered with rage. Did they really think that he was exhausted? They could hit him when he was down. In an instant, the Spirit Sea's heavenly Tao wheel and the origin power of the Spirit Sea merged. A violent force in the Spirit Sea was triggered and turned into a gigantic vortex that tore through the air and swallowed everything. Oh no, he has completely controlled the Spirit Sea. He can actually control the Spirit Sea to attack. The leading expert from the chaotic noble clan was shocked when he felt the strange movement of the Spirit Sea behind him. With a flash of flowing light, he instinctively turned into a flowing light and left where he was. In an instant, he appeared tens of thousands of miles away from the Spirit Sea and escaped from the gigantic vortex. "Honorable, save us!" The remaining 4 experts from the chaotic noble clan were not so lucky. As they roared, they were suddenly swallowed by the gigantic vortex and the primal chaos divine domain that had transformed from the Spirit Sea behind them. The brilliance instantly fell into the Spirit Sea. The gigantic palm followed closely and slammed heavily on the Spirit Sea's crystal wall. Rumble! Tens of millions of crystal walls around the Spirit Sea evaporated. However, the Spirit Sea was unharmed. Heavenly origin! Tens of thousands of miles away, Pan Lin roared loudly after escaping the calamity. He was so angry that his eyes spat out chaotic flames. He had wanted to take advantage of the situation and kill the master of the Spirit Sea. However, he had not expected to go for wool and come home shorn. He had even lost 4 experts from the chaotic noble clan. The Spirit Sea. The Apocalypse Lord's expression turned abnormally cold. Looking at the Chaos Fleet that had lost more than 80% of its members, he was so angry that he almost vomited blood. This time, 2 out of the 6 holy gods from the Western Dragon Divine System who had followed him here were also dead. The Wailing Lord and the Holy God of Earth Fisher had died. The remaining 4, the Lord of Wind Disaster, the Lord of Fire, the Holy God of Pain, and the Holy God of Hatred, had also been severely injured by the sword. It would be difficult for them to recover without several eras. Primeval Lord God, I swear once again that I will exhaust the power of the Western Dragon Divine System for 100 eras, 1,000 eras, and even until the end of the era, I will take good care of your Spirit Sea. Looking at the Spirit Sea, he seemed to have penetrated the crystal wall of the Spirit Sea and landed on Qin Feng. The coldness in his eyes was as if he wanted to cut Qin Feng into pieces. Chapter 1561. In the Spirit Sea, Qin Feng raised his head. His face was a little pale. Attacking several times in a row was a huge burden for him. However, when he heard the Apocalypse Lord's words, his expression was indifferent. "I'm waiting for the Western Dragon Tribe's care." Outside the Spirit Sea, many Divine System experts looked at the Spirit Sea that had regained its calm, and their expressions changed. Sensing the toughness of the Overgod in the Spirit Sea, many divine system experts had complicated expressions. This time, they had really underestimated the primeval Overgod. When the level 17 primeval Overgod unleashed his power, he was so terrifying. Not only did he withstand the Western Dragon Divine System's attacks, but he also ran out and crippled the Western Dragon Divine System's fleet. Now, less than a tenth of them were left. The Western Dragon Clan's divine branch had come here aggressively, and only a portion of them would be able to return. 2 of the 6 holy gods under the Apocalypse Lord had died, and the remaining 4 did not gain any benefit. All of them were severely injured, and their Overgod warships were reduced to dust. Without dozens of eras, it would be difficult for them to recover their peak strength. However, after this, the Western Dragon Divine System will be completely offended. Being targeted by such a huge force, the Spirit Sea will not have an easy time. There's also the Chaos Noble Clan. That Pan Lin is not a simple existence among the Chaos Noble Clan. He won't let this go so easily. In the chaos, the blazing collision had dissipated, and the huge battlefield was drowned by the eternal chaos vital energy in the blink of an eye. The Western Dragon Divine System's huge fleet was left with only 60 or so chaos battleships, and some of them had been severely damaged. They had sustained terrible injuries. In the Chaos Fleet, only a tenth of the billions of gods were left. 4 figures flew over from the chaos. The Lord of Wind, the Lord of Fire, the Holy God of Pain, and the Holy God of Hatred flew over to the Apocalypse Lord's side. Among the 4, the Holy God of Pain and the Holy God of Hatred were extremely terrifying. Their bodies were like porcelain that was about to shatter, and even their true spirits were full of cracks. Their flight was shaky. The Lord of Wind and the Lord of Fire were also covered in blood. The terrifying bloodstains seemed to have dyed the Chaos Fleet red. They looked furious and gritted their teeth. The injuries from the precepts could not be healed in a short period of time, and they looked quite weak. Overlord. The 4 of them knelt on one knee. This time, you must avenge the Erlang brothers. You all died so miserably. The eyes of the 4 Western Dragon Clan experts were bleeding. Among the 300 broken Chaos battleships, many of them were their direct descendants. When the experts of the Western Dragon Clan's divine branch saw the miserable state of the experts, they were shocked, and they took pleasure in their misfortune. The Western Dragon God System had always been a symbol of disaster. Although they were not like the Chaos evil gods, who took pleasure in destroying billions of worlds, they were still very powerful. However, they were still considered bandit, plundering for pleasure. Although they didn't like the Spirit Sea and didn't want to see the primeval Lord God monopolize the Treastrimsa heaven, they were still willing to see the Western Dragon God System suffer. Sensing the obscure gazes of the numerous God System's experts, the Apocalypse Master's gaze turned slightly gloomy. He surveyed the numerous God Systems in the dark. He wanted to remember all of these existences so that he could pay them a visit in the future. However, as if sensing the anger in the Apocalypse Master's heart that could not be vented, the various God Systems experts quickly left after witnessing the end of the battle. In a short while, only the Western Dragon God System's fleet and the Chaos Noble Clan's Pan Lin were left in this chaos region. When the Apocalypse Master saw this scene, his eyes flickered rapidly. He had anger that could not be vented. He looked around and finally fixed his gaze on a figure in the corner. He stared at this person coldly. Taoist creation. At this time, Taoist creation was also heavily injured. Qin Feng had gathered the divine power of the Spirit Sea to form a giant sword and was hiding in the Fire Overlord's battleship. As the battleship was destroyed, he was also grazed by the aftershock of the giant sword and was also heavily injured. Taoist creation felt a chill in his heart when he saw the Apocalypse Master looking at him fiercely. Oh no! Taoist creation felt the killing intent in the Apocalypse Master's eyes. Overlord, Taoist creation hurriedly explained. However, he found that he could no longer speak. An iron-like hand grabbed his neck and lifted him over like a chick. A dense chill almost froze him. The Apocalypse Master's cold eyes were just inches away from him. Taoist creation, because of your inaccurate information, my Western Dragon God System's fleet suffered heavy losses. We even lost 2 16th level Saint God. Tell me, how should I deal with you? Taoist creation's eyes flashed with panic and fear. He opened his mouth and wanted to scream. The Apocalypse Master looked at the ant in his hand coldly. I know you don't want to die. You're unwilling to accept this. However, you're definitely going to die today. However, leave the spirit sea to me. You can go in peace. One of his hands turned into a giant pitch-black claw filled with destructive power. The giant claw clenched fiercely, and Taoist creation let out a short and miserable scream. In his unwillingness, his body was refined into a ball of pure origin by the giant claw inch by inch. Rumble,